that's become the standard song, Charles.
There you go.
Couldn't think of anything from Finding Schemo that people would remember. So we went with the old standby there. This is quite a collage for today, Charles.
This is really, it's amazing. I'm somebody who can't even draw a straight line, so, to just think how the art department pulled this thing off in, less than 48 hours is, I'd have to employ a team of illustrators from the Philippines, for months to try to do something similar to this. This is incredible.
They could draw Imelda Marcos's shoes.
I've met her.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
How are the shoes?
She's very tall in real life. She's almost 6 feet tall.
I barely remember her. I was pretty young when that whole thing was going down in the Philippines. But, we've got all the usual suspects here, Charles. We've got Mr. Comey, the smartest lawyer in the world.
That's Shrillery?
Shrillery, yeah.
Eating krill?
Krillery. And then Bill as the shark. Of course, we've got our favorite orange president as the hero of the film. B-Rock.
Nice teeth.
Yeah, this was a hammerhead shark, but with the eyes separated out, it was hard to understand
really
that it
well
was
done.
Obama. And then, of course, Mr. Mueller there. I'm very curious about what's going on with Mueller and Michael Cohen and all this. I've been rereading those statements from Peter Carr, that very lawyery kind of, the assertions and statements about certain testimony given to the office were not entirely accurate. It's like that sounds like that could mean anything by the time a lawyer gets done with it.
Right. But no, seriously, the art department here deserves yet another bi-weekly bonus. This is definitely a candidate for inclusion in the coffee table book.
Right.
Already.
Right. And certainly it could be in a future version of the screensaver. Charles, people who are sponsoring the show at $10 and higher by either going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or making that one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth, they're still getting the wildly popular Sunday with Charles Volume 1 screensaver. And I have not yet been able to get some sort of automated way for that to happen. So if there's someone out there who has sponsored the show and has not yet gotten an email from me with the screensaver, you can just email truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org, and I will surely get that out the email door right away.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, people are enjoying that. And so today is our, 137th episode, Charles.
That's getting up there.
It is.
It's past the human life expectancy, if measured in years.
That's right.
Presently, anyway.
Dog years. But for people who are really interested in digging into this material, joking aside, we've got this playlist on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, which has, I would have thought, would already be at 80,000, but there's been some shenanigans going on with the, it was above this number earlier today, and then it dipped down below 79,700 for some reason. But people who want to catch up on all of the information can get every single episode of Sunday with Charles, as well as every single episode of Charles Ortel is closing in. It's an amazing amount of information. I continue to be confused by the fact that no sensible prosecutor has gotten involved in this matter yet.
Well, see, I think what's going to happen here, and Trump, if you think about it, is actually a master at changing the way people think about things.
I thought you were going to say trolling.
And trolling, that too. He's a master at that. But why I was so happy at your suggestion that we do this going back in whenever it was, June of 2017, is I saw it as the opportunity which I think it's become to lay out a case twice a week on average, lay down all these markers, and put the Clintons and indeed the co-conspirators in this criminal enterprise into a place where they're going to have to explain, once the prosecutors do pull the buttons, they're going to have to explain why they didn't react to any of this And the people who have supposedly been investigating this stuff since January of 2016 are going to have to explain why they didn't work more quickly to do something about it. And once the ka-ching happens, and the Clintons are turned upside down and all the money comes flowing out of their pockets into the U.S. Treasury, and all the money of the Gateses and the others who've been funding this massive criminal enterprise, but seemingly not caring too much that it's basically the world's largest fraud ever.
Scheme,
as it were. Yeah, you found this scheme already, and we're not even done with the show.
Exactly.
You're supposed to find it by the end, but I guess you're ahead of the class. So what will happen now is, I think, word will spread even more. I mean, the playlist that you have is fantastic, and I think to get just some people would be happy to get, particularly for something this long, 16,000 views, period.
Yeah, there are children in Iraq who would be thankful to have just one view.
Right. But seriously, I mean, when you look on podcast metrics, we've gone out to a place by design where we shouldn't be getting as many views as we are getting if we kept this short.
Because it's so long.
Yeah, it's so long and complicated and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And at this level, before Il Trumpo draws attention to this thing, which eventually I suspect he will, before we're getting this kind of traffic, imagine the kind of traffic you're going to get when around the world, nation after nation, one world leader or another world leader suddenly realizes, holy shit, these people have been really doing diabolical stuff to us. We want our money back, or the donor nations or the recipient nations. And the word spreads like wildfire, let's say, across South Africa, and then across Nigeria, and then down in Brazil, and then in France, and Germany. I don't want to sound like Howard Dean now. I'm not going to scream.
Yeah.
But when that starts happening, and then when people at universities start looking at this, and regulators start looking at it, and then this whole long library of now the 137th show and more coming will get a lot of attention, and people will start to ask the question, how come we didn't notice this sooner?
Right.
And if we did notice this sooner, how come we didn't do more about it?
Yeah.
And you start getting into that do loop, and it really goes crazy.
Well, I definitely feel like at some point there's going to have to be a reckoning where I can kind of picture all of these people in a room where you'll be there and kind of say something along the lines of, I'm not angry, I'm just very disappointed. And everyone will be like, oh no.
No, see, I actually think the way, I have seen this happen in my professional career decades ago, when I was representing one large firm or another large firm in a takeover battle or negotiation. And you'll have, let's say, the CEO, the wise chief executive officer in a deal will always reserve his or her powder and appoint a hothead to take the extreme positions and then come in at the last minute and cut the deal. And it will fall typically to the tough takeover lawyer, and there are a few of them, or there were a few of them then, the people you just didn't cross because they were involved in most every deal, and you're not going to, you may win on one deal, but they're going to take the crap out of you in every other deal. So it would fall to a lawyer like that to explain to a difficult hothead and CEO, listen, dude, that's not the way deals happen in the world. Okay, you can go down this track, but there are other people who could be CEO. Get what I mean? Like, we're going to get rid of you. You keep on doing this. So that kind of a message, I think, is starting to be delivered to the Clintons. It's like, Chelsea, another kid. 3 kids is a lot of work.
Is she having another kid?
Yeah, she just announced they
wow.
So
how old is she?
She's 30s. And actually, I wish her and her husband well.
Sure.
The deadbeat.
It was just somebody else to come visit her in jail, right?
Right. But no, honestly, I do wish them well. There's nothing more special than having a child, and I think that hats off to them actually for having 3 children. But as a guess, people in these top law firms and accounting firms, we're going to get into it a little bit on accounting firms today, are going to be delivering messages to the Clintons saying, look, you're not worth $125 billion like Jeff Bezos. And you're certainly not worth whatever you claim you're worth legitimately. And this thing is going to come crashing down. And you've had a nice run. You're former president. Your wife is never going to be president of the United States. You can forget about that. And we need to now be negotiating a deal here where you don't spend the rest of your life in prison. Except that's not going to happen. You're going to have to go to prison. I mean, those type of discussions could well be going on right now. And you know, when you never want to be on the receiving end of a message from a powerful law firm that has considered its options and said, you know what, we sort of want to continue to exist as a law firm, and so therefore we can't be in this criminal conspiracy anymore. In fact, we're going to fire Mr. Kendall, and we're going to fire somebody at Skadden Arps, and we're going to fire somebody else, and you know, we're going to turn on you.
We've been hearing a lot about Skadden Arps lately. I know a guy from my high school who went to work for Skadden Arps, but I don't know anything else about it. It's a giant international law firm, isn't it?
So what happened was back, you know, I started work in June of 1980 when there was still, you know, an old school network, and it used to be the case that if you wanted to be involved in takeovers, first of all, the established blue chip companies wouldn't do hostile takeovers, and there was prejudice. There was endemic prejudice, particularly against Jews.
Why would they not do hostile takeovers?
It was just, you know,
rude?
It's just we don't do things
Unbecoming.
like unbecoming. So actually, somebody you know, and I'm not going to, we won't mention his name, but he and I, our firm represented a large company in one of the early hostile takeovers. It was like, whoa, you're not supposed to do that.
Wasn't Carl Icahn the guy who started the hostile takeover?
No. But he was very much prominently involved in them. But that's not a firm. That's not a Dow component doing a hostile takeover against another Dow component. That kind of stuff was really frowned upon. And Skadden Arps was one of the firms. Another one was Ortel Lipton that decided, you know, F that. This is great business, and you know, we need to get involved in this kind of stuff. And to their enormous credit, they started out really as hostile takeover initiation and defense is what they focused upon, and then proxy fights and things like that. But today, Skadden Arps is a monstrous international law firm with all sorts of traditional practices. I don't know that Ortel Lipton is as big as Skadden Arps, but Marty Lipton, who may or may not still be alive, was, if he's still alive, he's a genius and a really good. Beyond being a shrewd lawyer, he's a master tactician, and guys like that those are the tough guys, tough men and women. They're the veterans, and there are similar people involved around charities, I think, and around the major league corporate law firms, and they get to a place. Skadden Arps is not going to blow up over the Clintons. They're not going to let that happen.
Right. Charles, Lars is asking us, why doesn't Trump nominate Sidney Powell for Attorney General? It's a good question.
Sidney Powell is really a wonderful person. I've had the honor of meeting her a few times, and you've met her as well. And she is one of those, many lawyers are actually crap writers, business lawyers. They write these sentences that have, 175 words in them and commas and asterisks and all this kind of crap, and they're just impossible to read, maybe by design in all the legal documents. Right. But Sidney is one of these lawyers who can actually write extremely well. So her book, what was it called again?
License to Lie.
No, it's pronounced License to Lie. But she is a gifted writer. I mean, that book to me reads more like a great spy novel than a legal tome. And I agree with you. She's a veteran of federal appeals court cases. Those are very complicated cases that have a lot to do, everything to do with arguing legal precedent and making legal precedent. So, yeah, she'd be a fantastic choice. And I would not want to be on the wrong side of Sidney Powell.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
She's also got a great sense of humor with this website, creepsonamission.com. I should have used some of these cartoon faces. I got to call Sidney and ask her if we can use that in some future, movie poster type deals for the show. So, Charles, with that, was there anything else?
No, we should jump into it.
Go right into the slides here.
Sure.
And there we are.
So I've told you before that, I did know a fellow, sadly he's passed away, who actually did hide an elephant in plain sight up in Millbrook, New York. Yeah. And that, I feel, is really what the Clintons have done here, aided by people across the political spectrum. And, for 20, we're going on our 22nd year of the Clinton Foundation, starting out at a time just when Bill and Hillary's life was in great peril, political life, that is to say, just as Monica Lewinsky was being encouraged to speak out and being pressured not to speak out, that's exactly when the filing papers went in to the IRS for the Clinton Foundation. And the Clintons then, if you go back to that time frame, it's a long time ago, 1997, they had basically no financial net worth at that point. They hadn't negotiated any book deals, and they had huge legal debts. So unclear how big they would end up being. They ended up at like $13, $14 million that we know about, Skadden Arps being one of the main firms.
Nobody said lying and raping was cheap, Charles.
Exactly. And so, here's this scheme that's been going on, and like the elephant in Peter Wing's castle up there in Millbrook that was just sitting there in the tableau, like looking out at the Hudson Valley, and you see that, yeah, exactly.
Wallpapering it is very difficult.
Exactly. But the thing is out there, and, nobody in these what do they call them, the journalists, all the mainstream press, the news has come out now that, they've all been maybe being paid off by Fusion GPS.
Oh, yes.
And, all these people who, they see Donald Trump's necktie doesn't match his shirt, or it's, is something's out of Melania Trump is wearing the wrong color boots with her jeans or whatever, and that's like an international scandal that they seize on right away. But the largest set of charity frauds is still ongoing, ever attempted, not just by a former president, but by anybody, and they can't see it. So the question is, what is it going to take for the Trump administration and the people inside the Trump administration now to act on this charity fraud? Because the longer you let this thing, keep on going, the more dangerous it becomes. At a certain point, the Clintons are going to try the argument on for size. Well, you guys knew about this. We assumed it was okay. We assumed we had tacit approval from the IRS. You didn't do anything about it.
Is that legitimate?
It's not legitimate. Of course it's not legitimate. But that doesn't, is anything the Clintons do in business legitimate? No.
No.
So, on the one hand, this 137th episode is a bit of a plea for, the governments. I know the government shut down in theory, but to get its act together and land on this thing, make an example of these people, and stop letting the Clintons get away with the rhetorical bullshit that they're trying on for size all over the world, that this thing is actually doing anything good, because it isn't. I even noticed that they've created something, we won't dwell on it today, but they created something called the CGI Action Network, which, there's no such, you have no legitimate right to create a political action enterprise out of this fraud, And they've got people, our good friends Kevin and Bob are sending us information about Hillary's Onward Together enterprise, which is staffed by all kinds of, ne'er-do-well, problematic people. The filings are all wrong. And it would appear that we may have this not entirely run to ground yet, but it would appear that it's possible they're using this enterprise to pay Hillary herself and Abedin and Dennis Chang and others. We're going to run this to ground. But it's almost as if the Clintons had enough time while Bill was president to figure out which positions were important, make sure that their people were put into those positions.
I think they had that long before he was president. They were doing it in Arkansas with the coroner, the attorney general, the investigators.
So they're doing it in the IRS, they're doing it in the Department of Justice, they're doing it at the Bureau of where you're supposed to register as a foreign agent, they're doing it all over the place. And
that's the best named bureau in all of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And so,
Charles, when will they open the Clinton Foundation unpainted furniture outlet? They've got every
Bob's,
other
Bill's, the stupid ad, My Pillow,
My Billow.
Right. But we're in a place, though, that's a little bit different here on the 23rd of January, 2019. And Donald Trump the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates, and suddenly we're beginning to care about the cost of servicing our government debt. We can't seem to get the deficit under control. Other countries are in a lot worse shape, other places like Europe and Japan. And
Venezuela's not so good today.
We'll get to that in a second. And so at a certain point, government's going to have to start to care about collecting tax revenue. So it won't be as easy for the government of Arkansas, God forbid, let's say they have a fiscal crisis. They're not going to be able to call up Mnuchin at Treasury and say, hey, we need a gigantic bailout for Arkansas because we don't believe in collecting taxes that are due on this Clinton Foundation fraud. They have I think a 6% corporate income tax rate in Arkansas, and the way I look at it, there could be a massive tax bill in Arkansas alone that the state could go after this fraud for, not to mention other states and the federal government and foreign governments. There's a lot of money in terms of just basic corporate income taxes that should be collected, and personal income taxes, not to mention penalties and interest, and not to mention what you could do by going against the private foundation donors here. So we're in an interesting place where this is now, I guess, 137 times we've kind of been asking people politely, would you mind ever doing your job a little bit here and getting the job done on behalf of the American people? And we're going to have to step it up a little. And one thing I like to emphasize, Kevin, our accounting friend, asked that I remind people about this, which I will. When you look up the rules that do apply to do and don't apply to certified public accountants, the first thing to understand is that unlike lawyers, certified public accountants don't have the accountant-client privilege. There's no such thing. I mean, there's no protection for an accountant. If you become aware of criminal activity, there's no shield for you behind a lawyer. I mean, you were supposed to basically come forward and you certainly don't want to let your firm be used as the key enabling factor. So the government of Ireland comes back and says, well, we assumed you were legitimate because BKD LLP issued an opinion that said, we're following accounting principles that are not allowed in the United States of America. We assumed you were following Irish principles, so we kind of like. I mean, you can't. I'm just teasing you there. I mean,
there's no accountant tiger privilege.
Exactly. So on the one hand, there's no accountant tiger privilege, and on the other hand, certified public, that word public is in the name, public accountants are supposed to consider the public interest. They're supposed to understand that forms that go out with the signature of the firm and of the individual, that say you're a licensed CPA, you're telling the public that you have considered this filing and you recognize you're submitting as a firm the filings that BKD has submitted, literally counting states and hundreds of filings across state lines, that you are putting those filings in, being fully cognizant and aware at all times that you need to serve the public interest. And the public interest is certainly not served, allowing people to pretend that this is a charity and then to take deductions against state and federal income taxes for something that is a self-enrichment political advancement scheme. I mean, that public interest is not served by that. The public interest is certainly not served by letting this idiot, Andy Kessel, put out financial statements that bear as much resemblance to statements that would be issued following U.S. generally accepted accounting standards or principles. You take your pick of what you want to call them. They bear about as much resemblance to that as, I don't know, one of those, who's the guy who does the artwork, the famous guy, Gaudi.
Oh.
Gaudi artwork. I mean, it's just.
I was going to say Bob, the guy with the happy trees.
Whatever. I mean, it's just these are just fictional financial statements. They bear no resemblance to reality. They don't deal with the actual entity. No one's gone through any trouble trying to tease out where are all the bank accounts, where are all the legal authorizations. Nobody has done any legitimate cross-checking of this.
What did Gaudi do that was fictional?
No, his artwork was just it's art, it's fiction. I mean, it's not like a true picture of anything. It's his interpretation.
Oh, I think you mean Dali.
Dali and also Gaudi.
But Gaudi was more of an architect.
But I meant Dali.
Got it.
Yeah.
Gaudi.
When I said Gaudi, I meant Dali. All those E's, what
exactly.
the hell.
But people who have been perhaps to Barcelona, well, I mean, this is certainly real.
That's real, but
That's
Dali.
Gaudi.
That's Gaudi. Okay.
Sorry.
Real, not
I'm
Dali.
getting you off on a tangent here, Charles.
That's all right.
There is a serious matter that I wanted to bring to your attention, however, because I was discussing this with Larry Nichols the other day, and Larry had worked for the Arkansas Development and Finance Authority, and when it was first started, and I was asking him questions about how this related to Iran-Contra and money laundering and all that. And as he was explaining it to me, I said, Larry, it sounds a lot like the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
And he said, oh, you're the first person to make that connection.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, I've read about this. This is basically, there's a similar enterprise up in Illinois that operated still operates. So the basic idea is you sell bonds for projects that sound interesting.
To promote economic growth?
Well, all kinds of stuff that, will sound appealing,
Supporting financing for affordable housing, agricultural business enterprises, industrial and economic development, capital improvement for state agencies and local governments, higher education funding, and related programs.
Well, you should slap the word sustainable in there and then put on the bottom for the children.
Exactly.
The basic idea is you sell these bonds to widows and orphans who don't check anything, and all they care about is the interest payment.
Blood with HIV infections.
Whatever, and you just loot the principal. You sell the bonds, you let a local investment bank collect a commission, the money goes to some agency over here that nobody can really check, and by the time somebody eventually figures out all the looting that's gone on, the looters will long be dead. And, so they don't particularly care about it. And this is really the problem. You are taking us a little bit off message, but not really. The problem with the system that we see, not in GE, with the regulation of GE, the failures to actually regulate GE and the big banks, big multinationals, failures to regulate big charities, multinational charities, you get to a place where you say, well, maybe these aren't failures. Maybe these are intentional decisions to lull people, give them a false sense of security that we have a regulatory apparatus, but then what you do is you say, yeah, we'll call it whatever you want, the Department of this, Department of Enforcement, whatever. In reality, the SEC won't, and the Arkansas Attorney General and others won't have the resources required to take on these determined brigands.
This is what I wanted to show you, Charles, because I was talking to Larry about this, and I noticed that Stevens,
1933?
Well, no, that's just for people, but it's talking about how he started it by trading Arkansas highway bonds, and that reminded me so much of Whitewater. So it's sort of like they come up with these schemes, and that's the thing. I wanted to ask you, what is it about bonds? Because I could tell right away this is some kind of scheme this guy Stevens cooked up in 1933.
Well, Stevens. I mean, 33 was the depth of the Depression, so a lot of things were trading at nobody knew what anything was worth. Stevens' family are very powerful, not just in Arkansas. They built up, all sorts of things, not simply the investment.
But that's when they started in 1933.
They may have even started before then with other ventures, but yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with. They back Republicans and Democrats, like it would appear all the big people do. We won't say who it is, but there are people who look down their nose at the Arkansas regulatory environment and suggest that if you want to do sort of a deal that might not make all that much sense, do it in Arkansas, because no one will care about it. And that really is not, that leaves Arkansas in the place that it's in today as one of the poorest states in America.
Yeah.
And it doesn't serve anybody's interests well. And I'm not whooping up on Arkansas from the argument that New York's a better place, because I wouldn't certainly make that argument. I'd say New York is even more corrupt, perhaps, than Arkansas.
Better restaurants, though.
Yeah, large. Well, I don't know. It depends on how much you like slop. What is that stuff they were serving? Raccoon?
Right. I haven't properly evaluated Arkansas restaurants. I've never been to Arkansas.
Yeah. That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, if we get back into the slide, the point here is, I think that there's no question that when we started on this, when I started on this, before meeting you, and now together, we both understand, and I think the audience understands, that we're not talking about somebody who operates a lemonade stand in Little Rock. We're talking about a very powerful collection of people who are not going to particularly enjoy what happens when the tide goes out and you get to see, what the beach looks like. They're just not going to really enjoy that moment, and so they're going to fight against it hard. And they're going to try to, as apparently happened, they're going to try to say, listen, if you go down this track of exposing us for what we've done, we're going to turn around and expose you, Republicans and Democrats alike. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not like we're sitting here with a credit card that has a lot of room on it. We have maxed out, figuratively, the nation's credit cards, and there's a lot of turmoil around the world, and there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to continue to wallpaper over and refinance our problems away. So I'm hoping that in this time frame, a series of events will come together. One, that it will suit people who don't like Trump to push to speculate, and push the capital markets into a crisis. Because in a capital markets crisis, you really are going to you're going to go all out against the Clinton Foundation and the people who've been supporting the Clinton Foundation. So that's one thing I do see looming large. The other thing I see looming large is that the defense that the Clintons are mounting against this is juvenile.
Is there a defense?
I'm saying it's juvenile. It's just like, oh, we'll ignore it. The ostrich defense, you know. You see my head, it's in the sand. I'm ignoring this problem. Do you hear my daughter's having another child? You know, I mean, it's like there's no defense. And what I would suggest as well to the Clintons and the others who would like to continue to assume that this is going to go away, unfortunately for the Clintons in this one, there is a massive public record. This isn't like finding the missing billing records out of that law firm, the Rose Law Firm. There's a massive amount of information in the public domain already, including there are hundreds of people who have made the mistake of putting their resumes into LinkedIn, bragging about what they claim they did for the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative or the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative at a moment in time where there was no such entity and no legal entity. And these people today, we're going to do shows about this where we're going to basically shame them into coming forward. You either got to try to defend this mess, which is not going to work well for you if you're at a university, for example, saying that you got this job, but actually you didn't realize it was a fraud, or you did realize it was a fraud and you went ahead and did it anyway. That's not going to sit too well with the codes of conduct that do operate in theory at these universities, most of which are tax-exempt entities. They're not going to want to have to admit that a senior person at this university was very happy to perpetrate a fraud on the American public and the international public. So you have that issue. And I actually do believe a goodly number of these people are actually decent. We may not agree on how to solve economic or political problems around the world, but a large number of people who may have initially gotten involved with the Clintons may have been starry-eyed do-gooders, who are willing to ignore obvious flaws for what they saw as the greater societal good of whatever it was, to pick on Eric Braverman as one example. But yeah, I mean, there are quite a few people like that who probably do. It's a common affliction that, you look at a General Electric and you say, or a Clinton, and you say, well, Bill Clinton was president of the United States. They couldn't convict him when they had him. Look at all his good works. Look at the awards that he has. Look at his watch collection, there's a book that's come out called Clinton in Exile, which is a very revealing book. And though I don't know that there was a conscious scheme to try to make it difficult to find, I couldn't get a copy out of the largest branch of the New York Public Library where you'd think you'd have it. I succeeded in getting this book, and there is a lot of revealing and incriminating information in that book.
You can get it from Amazon, it looks like.
Well, yeah, if you use Amazon, which I don't. Right. But I was able to get it from, I'll give a plug to Shakespeare and Company, which is a nice...
Did you print it on demand?
I did not, no. They actually had to go to they said they have two warehouses. They have a main warehouse and an auxiliary warehouse. And I had to get them to ask the main warehouse to ask the auxiliary warehouse to get me a copy, which I picked up on Monday when it was freezing.
Yeah, it was.
But anyway, so there's a big amount of evidence out there, and today we're going to take you through a case, and I hope there are government investigators watching this. We're going to take you through some facts. We found some new ones that I think make it impossible for any accounting firm, any legitimate accounting firm should turn down an assignment to issue audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2018.
Well, you just put the caveat on it right there. you need a legitimate accounting firm.
Well, there are quite, with our friend Kevin and Bob and others, there are many.
No, I'm saying we had BKD in this case.
But you got to rely, all the work that's out there on the Clinton Foundation relies on BKD's previous work through December 31st, I believe, 2012.
And that work was not good.
It was rotten to the core.
Yeah.
It was not even really work. So if we go into the next page, I know you keep growing your viewership, subscribership, and I guess you're pushing 80,000 on this one, and then the other one is over, I think, 10,000?
Yeah.
And people always ask me about this, and I only quote the YouTube statistics. We don't know the Periscope and Facebook and all that other stuff.
Well,
or do
we? Periscope has analytics, as does Facebook, but I don't think they're quite as extensive as YouTube. There's about 5,000 subscribers on Periscope. It grows so much more slowly than YouTube. Periscope is tied to Twitter, and of course Twitter has been shoving me down.
This Jack Dorsey's heel is on your throat.
It's a stiletto.
A stiletto. Ooh, that's not good.
Not good.
But just for those who are new to the experience, this is a different approach. This is a cooperative exercise. I do not model myself on George Stephanopoulos or whatever his name is at ABC and the angry gentleman. Who is that guy? George Won't.
I don't know that guy.
George Will is a very grumpy bow tie wearing guy who hates Trump and is very sure that he understands the world better than any other living human being. That's not the approach here in this show, nor with Crowdsource the Truth. We're trying to actually get to the truth in a cooperative exercise where we throw out some ideas and we give you the ability to check our approach and to take our approach further, or maybe suggest we go in different directions. We like to give people links to make your work easier for you, to save you time. And we do this hoping and fully expecting that we're going to be going back over and hopefully months, years from now, and saying, we said this on such date, here's what happened afterwards. We're laying down marker after marker after marker. And once we get to a place where indictments are handed down and prosecutions begin, people, and congressional and senatorial and other hearings around the world begin, people will be able to ask, the people who have prosecutorial discretion will be able to ask the defendants, to put it politely, when did you first become aware that there were issues in the way you were operating these supposed charities? You do understand when you run one of these things that you have to comply with all law around the world. You can't just say, well, I'm only going to, I follow, and no aspersions meant here, the laws of the great government of Brazil. I don't care about, U.S. law. I pick the law that I want.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly. I follow the you put the lime in a coconut principle of, how you put your financial statements together. So this is very much a conversation, and we're trying to get people, and I really do appreciate the work you do, Jason, and all the help you've been, and beyond that, the work that the subscribership and viewership does, circulating the many broadcasts, because we're starting to get some really serious traction. When I talk to the network of friends that has developed now over the years, people in various media outlets, and I explain what we've been trying to do and what we've accomplished, that they actually can't believe it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I like defying people's belief. Right now, Charles, we've got about 629 total viewers. When I happened to see Rush Limbaugh on YouTube the other day, he had like 640. I guess most of his viewers and listeners are on more traditional mediums, but it's interesting to see all those kind of famous big guys are, where they once laughed at, podcasting or whatever you want to call it. It's
well, yeah, it has. I don't know if you mentioned at one point you were going to do simulcasting or Apple iTunes or something like that. But when I was taking that 5-year break to look after my kids and living upstate near Millbrook, or in Millbrook as well, what you learn when you're, the single parent taking care of kids who are in between appointments and whatever, you spend a hell of a lot of time in the car, a tremendous amount of time in the car, and you can sit there and watch the squirrels and watch the squirrel meet moose. or you could put something on and listen to it. And I wouldn't be at all surprised that people are going to enjoy listening to what we talk about as they drive around, even though they can't see the slides. Especially if you're able to pull the slides down before you go on your drive. And so I would regularly, go on 2-hour drives, 3-hour drives, having to get this step accomplished and that step and another step and whatever.
Wow.
So yeah, I would bet there's a big market for that.
And Charles, Thomas Tyson is telling us that Jack Dorsey wears a soft yoga shoe, which might be correct.
That does not surprise me. Let's hope he keeps them clean.
That could be speculation.
Yeah. But anyway, so if we go into the next slide, I'd like to just comment on some breaking stories. And today was a day where I started out thinking, we'd be talking primarily about one set of things, and then the news was coming so fast and so furiously. I guess we'll do the this just in at the end, but we could maybe do that at the end. But there's a great piece by our friend, Mr. Solomon.
Yeah.
He was on Hannity the other night. And I think he does so much great work, and it says here opinion contributor, but he's really a journalist. He has sources, and he's cross-checking sources.
Wasn't there some technical reason why he had to be listed as opinion?
Well, I think this allows him to get his stories out without an editor saying, I don't like the tone, or I don't like this, or I don't trust your sources, or whatever. He can just say, look, it's my opinion based on my work. And if I'm wrong, okay, I'm entitled to make an error in my opinion.
They should make the New York Times a fiction novel.
I think they should just give up on that thing. You would have to. I don't think people like to say there's a price for everything, but I don't think there is a price that could be paid to me to get me to read the New York Times, a full edition of the Sunday New York Times again. I don't think I will ever do that. It's a waste of money and time.
I hear you.
But this is a very interesting piece, not simply for its substance, but when considered in context. So this is basically saying that there was a full-scale operation that launched perhaps as early as July, if not maybe May 2016, to make sure the FBI and the mainstream media covered this allegation of the dirty Steele dossier and the lurid implications of all that. That this was a coordinated effort, and why I say in context, at the very same time they were doing this against Trump, they were choosing to ignore or continue the policy of ignoring, an obvious question of like, what in the hell? Why did the Clintons? Why were they allowed to operate a fraudulent charity scheme and then conduct 100% of the State Department's business using toilet bowl-based servers? I mean, it's like, it's not, you don't have to go and get into the fine details of does this regulation and paragraph and subparagraph number apply. It's just like, over here, you have the toilet bowl server, and over here, you have toilet bowl allegations of, hookers peeing on bed sheets. It's just so ridiculous. The allegations are ridiculous, and the fact that you didn't put the kibosh, that you didn't go, here you have, and I've got a piece coming out with the great Katerina Blinova, who's now decided to do, I think, weekly pieces minimum on this whole stuff, where, we've covered this early on. There was a senior State Department person who sends a letter to Dopey James Comey saying, hey, Dope, I want to come by. I'm a pretty senior level person, and I want to take you through the many ways in which, Shrillery and her collection of people in the coven, are basically mishandling classified information. I have chapter and verse on it, and they're doing it at the direction of Barack Obama.
He's like, yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
I threw it out.
Yeah. Does it never work for you? Because that's when I think I'll meet with you. Okay? Yeah. Click. And so the guy shows up, or woman, or whatever it is, shows up and has a meeting. Late January, I think the 27th or thereabouts of 2016. Kind of a few things going on. Bernie is talking about the billionaires and millionaires and paying his wife's bills.
That's good.
And he has a shot. And maybe this guy was a Bernieite, maybe he wasn't, but the obvious contrast between a
Doing
raging
nothing. Yeah.
set of problems. You have a Secretary of State who's like getting ready to come back in the White House and steal the furniture they didn't steal the first time,
Yeah.
and measuring the drapes, etc. You're not going to prosecute her, even though she's, we know that she was named as a target in the first Clinton Foundation fraud for public corruption, and likely. When you get into that, when we get into the full file, somebody's going to get in that file eventually. And when we get in that file, we're going to discover she was centrally involved in that stuff while Bill was president, maybe even orchestrating the creation of this Clinton Foundation in the very beginning. So this isn't like, things come, we make the odd error here, I foot fault a little bit, I foot fault every freaking serve. And worse, and then the other side wins, and I'll just steal the prize money and go off to the next tournament. That's what these people do.
One of the most overt things they do is that there doesn't even seem to be any kind of elaborate story to explain. It's just, we didn't do that. It's like, oh, but you did. There's a ton of documented evidence. No, we didn't.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We're off. I'm busy.
Done.
Energizer Bunny.
No prosecutor would pursue this. And they're like, oh, I guess nobody would. It's a Jedi mind trick, and it's done.
Right. Exactly. And then, we have this story. It's a great story here. And it's funny, the questions I got today from Ekatra and Oblinova were like, what the hell? This guy, Victor David Hanson, is an American hero. And I think he's put his finger right on it, that, the FBI has been running this country for a while. I wouldn't be at all surprised that what actually happened in the period between the election of 2008 and the inauguration. Remember, Barack Obama was interviewed by the FBI and asked questions, and so was Valerie Jarrett, about, exactly what were you guys doing with the Blagojevich guy and maybe auctioning Barack's Senate seat?
When did they ask him about that?
Between the election of 2008 and the inauguration of January 20th, 2009. Oh. So Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett were each or at least interrogated under oath, for their roles in this thing, which has sent Blagojevich to prison, the former governor, who would have had the right to, to say who succeeds Barack Obama. So, as a guess, the FBI has many, many law and order, decent human beings who really do risk their lives every day for us, and beyond that, hate politics, hate politicians, and play by the book.
I think most of them got fired.
But then there are the shysters, who basically figured out, the McCabe's, the Comeys, et cetera, that, screw that, I'm going to get rich, and this information is power, information is valuable. And in the FBI files, forget the Facebook, metadata, in the FBI files that exist on probably everybody, but lots and lots of people, there's enormously valuable information, which a brigand will be very happy to pay to get.
Brigand?
Criminal.
Oh.
It will be an enterprising criminal will be very happy to pay to get. And the Clintons understand this. They understand what's in the FBI files because they've probably seen their own FBI files.
Well, this is a tried and true method that the FBI has used since the days of J. Edgar Hoover. He famously had dossiers on everybody in Washington, D.C., presented Lyndon Johnson, allegedly, with a dossier on John F. Kennedy that had photographs of Kennedy engaged in a romantic affair with an East German spy. And I've heard many times that LBJ knocked on the hotel room door and said to John Kennedy, either I'm the vice president or I'm going to go give these to Richard Nixon and you can deal with it in November. And Johnson had a plan to knock out Mr. Kennedy from the beginning.
Well, that happened eventually, right?
It did.
It did. But so, I think the issue there is that if you're going to give this enormous amount of power, I remember, as I'm sure everybody who's an adult remembers very well what happened on September 11th. I happened to be here in New York as that was happening. And at the time, I was struck by how immediately cars that had their American flags on them, and it was really actually very nice to see people forget about their political differences and just focus on trying to save New York, a rich city that really didn't need outside money, but money came pouring in and help. But the thing that struck me is how quick people were to say, oh, I don't care about my personal liberties. I don't care about the intrusion of the deep state. I've got nothing to. The mantra was, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't care about that. And when people start thinking like that, that's really dangerous stuff, because one thing we know about government and big anything is it's inefficient, and big anything will not keep sensitive information truly sensitive, as we see. So I think that was a big mistake, and there needs to be a countervailing penalty for people like Comey and now Hillary, and all these people around, whether it was Valerie Jarrett, Loretta Lynch, all these people who decided, you know what, we serve a higher power or a higher mission. Forget that effing Constitution. It was written on the backs of slaves. Forget it. Doesn't matter. We're going to create a new. When you start thinking like that, and you forget about the little oath part, where you swore an oath out at the beginning. There was an election. People care that you follow the rules. And you start burning the Constitution and just doing whatever the hell you want because there's a higher urgency or imperative that you've suddenly concocted out of whole cloth, that's when you're delusional. I mean, that's criminal behavior. That's insane criminal behavior. And we were too quick as a nation, I think history will show, to surrender to that mentality and enable the creation of 17 security agencies. And
I think they already existed, to tell you the truth. I mean,
not 17.
What were the new ones that they created?
They created one above all else. Defense, was it DIA or there was NSA? No such agency is old, but they created a higher.
ONI.
I forget what it is. I'm not good. I'll bring it back. But I think there's a very important lesson there. We do, absolute power does corrupt absolutely, and the suspicion, I think, is that there are, anybody who would be crazy enough to run for a higher elective office is likely to have some sort of issue in his or her background.
But not only that, Charles. I mean, they can go into absolutely everything and pull out a communication. We've seen people try to do this to you. People have definitely tried to do it to me, where they say, oh, we have this thing, and they manipulate it and they change it. And maybe there's a sentence that is an actual sentence that you wrote or said or whatever, but they attach that to some other thing, and they use your information, like what they're doing with Dr. Corsi. So his son was helping him repair a computer, and because he sent a text that said something like, is it okay for me to erase the hard drive? Now they've got him speaking to a grand jury, having to hire a lawyer. So
where is Hillary right now? Having
exactly.
Bleach bit?
No, she's sledgehammering hard drives.
It'd be like the old Soviet Union days where you'd have, the people on the riflery team, what was it? What would they do? They would be
skiing and shooting.
People on the skeet shooting team, would be paid gun testers, who would have to fire guns, and people would, it's absurd that you would make an issue of Corsi and let, Cheryl Mills, Abedin, all these people who are destroying with, I don't know what they use, instruments, destroying computers and hard drives and bleach bitting. And
they
do all
gave
this
them immunity in exchange for
nothing. Yeah, of course. That's the treatment. So on the one hand,
and Dr. Corsi's stepson has got to go and,
Yeah, to the periodontist. But it's ridiculous. So speaking of looking at laptops, this I did notice from our mutual friend, you know him much better than I do, a true pundit. This is quite an interesting story that would ring true to me, that from what we know, and we've talked about this before, we've had the actual links to the various search warrants and the chronology, we've been through that in some considerable length, that apparently people who are on the receiving end now of investigations, former FBI people, are saying, look, you keep coming after us, we're going to expose the Clintons. We're going to expose, perhaps they're threatening, I would guess they're threatening to expose Obama and Jarrett and others, because there's no way in my mind that the people close to the top of government would have looked at the Clinton Foundation on the one hand, and looked back in this time frame. We're going to show you just how out of kilter the Clinton Foundation, that's putting it charitably, as it were, out of compliance the Clinton Foundation was, just as this stupid memorandum of understanding was entered into in 2008 and to govern it 2009. There's no way that people who are actual lawyers, who take their job seriously, actual accountants, who take their code of professional responsibility seriously, would look at this and say, oh, yeah, why not? Hillary, her whole team, you don't need to use secure servers. You don't need to use government-approved devices. Buy them on eBay. You know, go to Russia. They're not spying against us. Take these eBay-purchased and eBay-vetted devices with you and lose them.
Yeah.
You know, go to a disco in Moscow and just lose your laptop. And that's no problem. Nobody's going to try to hack.
Did that happen?
Something
Lost in
similar.
Moscow?
They lost
Wow.
devices all over
Who's
the place.
even bringing a laptop to a disco in Moscow? You know, Charles, nothing says I'm a serious accountant like hanging out with a 7-foot tiger.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I sure hope the guy doesn't sleep with a tiger stuffed animal.
You know, it's funny how stuff like that, I mean, the whole BlackBerry purchased on eBay, people are just, there's this meme of a little cartoon dog sitting in a house on fire and he's drinking coffee and he's like, this is fine. Like,
Right.
how could people think that is remotely close to anything okay? She bought the thing. I mean, her excuse was she liked the keyboard better, but it's like,
Yeah, I mean,
that's fine if you're the president of the PTA, but you need to use the encrypted, secured device that the CIA or whoever has told you, the State Department has told you, this is the device. You can't, there's so many ways that someone could interfere with a BlackBerry being bought on eBay,
Right.
keyloggers and hacking
Oh, yeah.
them. And
well, I mean, if we think about it, again, there's no show that I know of that venerates a conservative president in an administration. But of course, we have the West Wing, and then we have the Hillary campaign advertisement, Madam Secretary, and it's always the valiant, hard-working public servant who puts the interest of the people ahead of our own personal interest to the detriment of the family and herself and her fragile health and all this kind of stuff. It's ridiculous. I mean, in this case, you can't go and say, I was the first lady in Arkansas, the first lady in the President of the United States, so I know the inner world. I was a senator, a secretary of state, and I understand, I'm uniquely well qualified to be President of the United States because I understand the severe threats that are up against us every day. Those Russians, those Chinese who didn't pay us enough. I mean,
pay no attention to the 4,000 angry people charging the border.
Right, exactly. Pay no attention to that. And by the way, because technology threats, those are really subtle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the Democratic Party hires Pakistanis to be a
who've been barred from accessing the network by the U.S. Capitol Police.
Because I'm that smart. It's just the inconsistency here is just so great, and the fact that whatever she says is 62 million or 64 million people voted for her in theory, there are 64 million Americans who would have actually flipped that switch, to vote for that team, knowing where we would have been had the Clintons actually managed to win. Says a number of things to me. I mean, I suppose the good news is that there are at least probably 14 million fake votes for Hillary Clinton, just to pick a number out of the doesn't bear any resemblance to the number of illegal people inside this country, but there's probably 14 million or so completely fake votes. There can't be that many people who would have actually considered the evidence and said, I want more graft, more corruption, I want more stink. That's what I want.
Charles, we have recently started a show with Jimmy and Joanne Moriarty. And, you and I have been over this ground many times. People watching us right now are familiar with all of this. But what happened in Libya, and I mean, I'm talking about going back to when I was a little kid and Ronald Reagan telling us all this stuff about Gaddafi, was so far from true. We did an episode, people can see it on Patreon. We did an episode with Jimmy and Joanne about, they went to visit a family whose father was in Gaddafi's army. He was in the Libyan army cleaning up landmines, and he was murdered by mercenaries, and his image was put all over TV, and they said this guy was, in Gaddafi's army, and they're killing civilians. It was just blatantly untrue. And, you look at this family, you look at the face of this little 4-year-old girl whose father has had his head cut off, basically, by mercenaries, and Hillary Clinton laughed at the destruction of this country and the murder of Gaddafi.
Well, she laughs because she knows that the people in the lapdog mainstream media are just going to buy whatever she says, hook, line, and sinker. I mean,
Well, and then the people of the United States do as well. But I mean, who could laugh at an event that caused the death of this little girl's father? I mean, this is 4 lives right here that have been ruined by this.
Minimum.
How many?
Yeah, minimum 4.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And please don't tell me that those are 3 of his wives, but
No, those are all his daughters.
all 4 are daughters?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's horrific. Yeah, well, for what has happened in Libya alone, forget the
Right.
rest of
That's right. You can select one thing that's been done by Hillary and Bill Clinton, and it's so heinous that how could it be forgiven, let alone support her to be a leader of our country?
Yeah, and to give another plug to Thomas Paine, Michael Moore,
Yes.
this is really, I mean, this now begins to make a lot of sense to me. As I understand it, journalists are not well paid. And so into the mix comes Fusion GPS and the Clintons who say, okay, you're not that well paid. Evidently, this is a story alleging that Fusion GPS was paying reporters on the side. And if that's true, this Fusion GPS needs to be shut down, and the people who may have been routing these payments to journalists need to be exposed for the crooks that they are. This has to be a violation of I don't know how many different kinds of laws. It's got to be a violation of election law. It's got to be certainly, if there are any standards left in the mainstream media, it has to be a violation of that. TD Bank.
That's Justra, isn't it?
I don't think it's Justra, but it's close to TD Bank.
There are
It's
other
somebody
Canadian,
else.
but-
They're definitely a Clinton Foundation donor and very close to the Clintons. Speaking fee,
Toronto Dominion.
former Toronto Dominion Bank, exactly.
Yeah.
So the notion, I mean, now you mentioned the point about John Solomon that he would not allow you to buy him dinner or
The
something like
pizza, right. He wouldn't let me pay for a pizza.
that. Yeah.
Well, that was good, I thought. I remember thinking, boy, what a...
Right, and that's that's the correct way to do it.
Yes.
And it used to be that journalists would have expense accounts, and maybe for precisely that reason, so that they could maintain their independence. But anyway, but the fact that the Clintons might have, and the list that you get to when you look into this it's a stunning list. I mean, it's not like 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
It's
it was a big
many,
list.
many people.
have that
And
list
including Maggie Haberman, many people at the New York Times, CBS, the leading lights at NBC, CNN, as it were.
I'm not surprised by any of that, Charles. I've thought for a long time that, a giant corporation owning the news and paying the people who talk about the news millions of dollars was the absolutely wrong way to go. In fact, it was one of the main reasons why I created Crowdsource the Truth, not only to call out the lies in the news, but to try to totally change the way the whole thing is monetized. That's, small payments from lots and lots of individuals.
So we'll fly through this because I'm mindful of the time here a little bit. That I think the Hill story, another Hill story, is that Donald Trump, this political idiot, this neophyte, is basically has maneuvered Nancy Pelosi into the proverbial box canyon here, out of which she will not emerge unscathed. Because it'd be one thing if Donald Trump was asking, let's say, for us to send $150 billion to our sworn enemy, Iran, that they could say it's their money, but it was under our control. So some like me would say, yeah, maybe their money, but we control it. So as far as I'm concerned, we gave them their money back, but we didn't have to do that. It's not like he's asking for that in the middle of all the evidence that Iran is trying to cancel our shit, and send missiles out, to our allies and wipe Israel off the face of the earth. He didn't ask for that. He asked for $5.7 billion, which is, the American people did vote in 2016 and gave a clear mandate, unlike Bill Clinton's 2 terms, and of course Hillary Clinton received a clear mandate to forget about trying to be president.
Yeah.
Get home by all available means necessary, fire up that Scooby-Doo van.
I'll apologize in advance for telling a story, but it's a
Go
good
for it.
story. This their money, our money thing. One time I had provided equipment to an IMAX movie, and I could tell right away that the producer of this IMAX movie was going to screw everybody involved. So I did a lot of things that made them think, boy, this guy Jason's a hard ass. But it was like, look, I don't want to lose my money and I don't want to lose my equipment. So at the end of the shoot, I got my money And something happened where the producer told some of the camera guys that they had hired. I wasn't on the set. I wasn't, running this thing. They told these guys that they had given their money to me. So these guys called me up and said, "Oh, the producer said you have our money." I said, "That's incorrect. I have my money. He needs to go get some other money to give to you." I don't know where your money is.
Right. Exactly, but I mean, there was a clear mandate given to Trump, and the polls do show that even now, and especially among Latino voters, Trump's advantage amongst Latinos is soaring in the double digits.
Because legal Latino immigrants recognize that it's a risk to their family members if they're going to try to get, all this stuff he's saying about coyotes raping the women and then being given birth control to avoid getting.
Right, it's gross. And so the point here is that if you listen to the mainstream media, you're going to think Trump is losing this. But the reality, as usual, I mean, the first question is, if you're listening to the mainstream media, January 23rd, 2019, just call up your local head doctor and ask for an emergency appointment, because you shouldn't be doing that. That's as bad as like listening to the sound of Nancy Pelosi's nails on a chalkboard. I mean, or Hillary's for that matter. Right. But anyway, so I think this negotiation is going to end up going very well for Trump and very poorly for Nancy. And I like to spell her name P-I-L-L-O-C, Pill-O-C. I mean, she's going to get she's going to lose. I think she's going to get knifed by the left, hard left, and she's going to get knifed by the moderates, and that's before Trump gets into her. And now we have this Nimrod, a new guy, and has decided that he's going to try to get impeachment going against Brett Kavanaugh, as if the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing went well for Democrats, because it did not go well for Democrats.
Well, what do they want to impeach him on?
That he lied in his confirmation hearing.
About what?
I don't know. They'll make something up. But I mean, the point that you'd want to go stir this fight back up, it did not go well for the Democrats, in my view. And of course, we do have Brett Kavanaugh. He is an associate justice of the Supreme Court at this moment.
What happened to Blasey Ford and all the women who had all these allegations against him?
Unproven allegations that may have been, they false.
Yeah, I believe they were false. Yeah. But in other words, where are they now?
But this is not. I mean, let them go. I suppose we can encourage the Democrats to go down this track, because it's really going to turn off the voter, especially the independent voter, by November of 2020.
They won't give up.
And then we get the next one after that. This is our friend Kevin sent this to me this morning. I don't know if there's an X in the upper right there. And we like whistleblowers. We think whistleblowing needs to be encouraged and venerated, frankly, not just because we're doing some of it, but what we see here is the scam artists have the upper hand. These complex frauds, tough for the regulators to follow even if they want to, tough for them to get the resources from the political class to do it, tough to upset the apple cart. But the apple carts need to be upset. And so we stand with whistleblowers.
But these complex frauds are very in vogue, Charles. People want to do things where the technology is ahead of the law, and get over with cryptocurrency exchanges and things like that, so that they can steal their tens of millions before the law even figures it out.
Exactly, but we can't let that happen. So now I wrote this. It's interesting. There's Michael Cohen this morning was going to testify, and the whole big storyline is that the Daffy AOC was going to quiz Michael Cohen.
Oh my God!
That's. I wish you could do pay-per-view on that one.
What's your favorite color?
Or
like, what is she going to ask him?
Yeah, you want ketchup with your fries?
Yeah,
onion rings with that burger? It's just not.
She's like, do you know that the world will end in 12 years?
It'd be like, dude, do you know?
Yeah, like.
And she's gotten coaching. She's wearing the Chanel suits and she's using her hands like all these things, and it's embarrassing. I remember, and
they got all the biggest idiots joining this committee.
I know, but I remember actually, and you see it, and unfortunately, in this 29-year-old AOC. there's a moment in life, and it comes around her age, it might be a little bit earlier, it might be at age 40, where people in power, who hold the real power, regard you as junior, but just because of your age. You're younger than their children.
And lack of experience.
And lack of experience and accomplishment, just to pick on a few things.
And lack of intelligence and capability.
And tact, and decorum, and whatever else. And so it's one thing to, emerge on the scene as Gilbert Gottfried, the comedian, and expect to be taken serious, because that's never going to happen when he's playing in character. And it's another thing to have been, at age 29, there are journalists, many journalists are incredibly accomplished by age 29. They've won all kinds of awards and honors, and they've done very in-depth investigations, and they should be taken seriously because they're thoughtful. But this is somebody who couldn't really hold down a job at a restaurant. And restaurants are tough jobs, as a waitress, but I mean, apparently there are disgruntled former employees who work with her who said she wasn't exactly honest in how they allocated the tips. And, there are all kinds of stuff.
Wow, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's all kinds of negative. But there's going to be negative chatter about her.
Anybody, really.
And you got to check those stories out. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not. But the point is, if you're looking at this person's resume, the most impressive thing that she's done is showed up for work. Well, she hasn't even showed up for work yet because it's shut down, right? That's the most impressive thing that she did. She managed to somehow to best somebody who people expected in the punditry class that she was that he was going to be the next Speaker of the House, that Crowley guy.
Now, I don't want to make you jealous, Charles, but this was created for Larry Nichols yesterday. AOC marks the spot.
It was very well done. Very well done. Yeah, very well done.
So there she is.
And I'm sure that's the G-rated version.
Well, that's just, this is the outfit she was wearing in that BU dance video. It seems,
Yeah, nothing, look, it's nothing, she's an attractive young lady. It's nothing wrong with going out and having a good time, but,
That video was put out there to market her, to tell people, hey, look at her. She's, wiggling around like somebody in a music video or something.
So, but the thing about the Cohen testimony that's interesting is that they're breaking news. He's not going to testify. He's come out saying, that Trump and Giuliani and people around the Trump administration are threatening him and his family. So
what?
It just happened hours ago.
But Trump's not doing that. I heard that, but I thought he meant like people on Twitter or something.
No.
He's saying Trump is threatening him?
Basically.
That's crazy.
Oh, I know. So, in the irony department, because socialism works so well, we have, and this just in, we'll do at the end, we have actual footage for what's going on in Caracas right now.
I saw that.
And I think people need to take a step back and consider what we're doing here. Here we have the United States recognizing the interim president.
That's a good idea.
And that does give, if you're sitting there in Moscow, you might think that it would be amusing to recognize Hillary Clinton as the interim president of the United States, or to have somebody.
This kid looks 12. He's got a gun there.
Well, that's a sad state of affairs in these socialist countries that work so well. When they crumble down, there's no toilet paper and there's no nothing. And when you decide that it's immoral for people to have money and billionaires because there's ringworm.
Look at this, and now they're advertising the thing I just bought a power supply for.
But if you go into this story for a bit, what AOC did in that Riverside Church chat that she had, is she tried to make it's a false equivalence argument. It's what Barack Obama was doing all the time. There shouldn't be billionaires because we have a problem with ringworm in Mississippi. Well, you don't get to say that when you're spending $7 trillion a year on government. Right? It's not
you
like.
You also don't get to say that when you're wearing a watch that costs more money than anybody in that country has, and a suit of clothes that costs more than a house in Venezuela.
Right.
She's a total hypocrite.
Right, exactly. And she's saying that this is there's some very well recognized journalists who are pointing out that what she's doing is actually quite similar to what Hitler did.
Ocasio?
Yeah, she's making outlandish claims. Outlandish suggestions.
She's definitely hotter than Hitler.
Yeah, I'll give her that. But the point here is, though, that just at the time that AOC is trying to sell socialism, it's crumbling before your eyes in Venezuela. And it's not like Maduro's sitting there saying, you know what, if you don't like socialism, I'll tell you what, we'll respect your views in the election. The sanctity of the ballot box, that's what we're going to do. They go through an election, they stuff the election, you know, they had the right team. I guess Hillary's team went down to Venezuela. They stuffed the Venezuelan election for Maduro. People are having none of it. We're going to show you the Caracas tape is live, and you wouldn't want to be Maduro in Caracas right now, I don't think.
No.
Then we have, you see this one, that AOC's distant cousin sadly met an untimely end.
Oh, what was that about?
This is somebody who would climb the mountains in Taiwan and then put on a bikini on top of the mountain, and after she put the bikini on, Gigi Wu fell off the top of the mountain and froze to death.
Whoa. Now wait a minute. How is this person related to AOC?
Well, she's craving public attention and doing stupid crap, and this is what happens when you do that. You get she's a tremendous amount of attention on social media until she died.
Oh, she's not actually related to AOC.
Well, how do you know? I mean, she could be 1,024th related to her,
right,
for all we know.
You know what? There's a lot of people who do this. There's some Russian kid who's climbing skyscrapers and taking GoPro video. I'm not into that sort of thing at all.
You're just a stay-at-home body. I mean, you're like...
We had a scene in Amazing Spider-Man just, shooting some background stuff for effects from the roof of the Flatiron Building. Have you ever been up there?
No.
Of course you haven't. No one's allowed up there. It's totally unsafe to be up there. It is a flat roof with not even an inch of lip. You go to the roof of this building and there's this high
It's
wall.
called the Flatiron Building.
Yeah.
It's
It
flat.
was incredibly dangerous to be on the roof of that building.
I mean, I feel horrible for her family, and it's sad. But again, when you're in the business of just trying to attract attention for yourself, you'll get the attention. The stupider the thing you say, the more attention you're going to get. But again, going back to AOC's claims about, there shouldn't be billionaires because we've got a ringworm problem, which Charles Lane, who is Washington Post columnist or opinion writer, pointed out that ringworm is not really much of a thing. It's not like...
Ringworm? Did she say ringworm?
Yeah, that's what she said. White billionaires are immoral. There shouldn't be any billionaires because we still have a ringworm problem in Mississippi.
Ringworm just like a rash?
Exactly.
Does nothing?
Exactly. Yeah, and
doesn't Dr. Scholl's have a cure for
ringworm?
I
guess. I mean, there should be. I mean,
some cream on that?
Or there's AOC is probably going to sell, AOC ringworm mendicant or whatever.
She had to have that wrong. Ringworm.
She said ringworm. That's what
I'm saying.
Said.
Whoever briefed her was like.
But that's just an absurd argument that there shouldn't be billionaires because there shouldn't be a $7 trillion spending in the United States of America, and no accountability. And Nancy Pelosi can keep government shut down because she doesn't want to have a legitimate negotiation with Trump. But anyway, this is closing out, and Ocasio basically has told us that the world's going to end in 12 years, and some people might say, well, okay, that being the case, I guess we should do some skiing. Divide our time between skiing, eating, and what else. Because if the world's going to end in 12 years, if you're so sure of that, then, what are we going to do about it? If you're so sure that's actually going to happen. But to me, again, I am not a scientist, in part because my father is a scientist, and I see the rigorous way in which he has thought throughout his long life. And my father actually is a nuclear physicist whose thesis was published in the Journal of Physical Review Letters on the impact of cosmic wave radiation on the Earth. So when he was in his thesis was published when he was 26.
Yeah, but I looked it up on Google, Charles. It said he's wrong.
Oh, it did not. Yeah, I don't think so. You looked it up on Instagram and iPie or whatever.
Tidbit for a friend of mine.
Is that what he's? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. But I'll grant that there could be, massive threats posed by what people now want to call. Before it was global cooling, then it's global warming, now it's climate change.
Why don't they just call it pollution?
Or whatever it might be. But the point is, let's really look and think this through properly. I mean, one of man's conceits through history is to believe that, for a long time, for most of man's existence, we believed that the sun revolved around the earth, and that wasn't right, and Galileo kind of went to death, for challenging it. I mean, we have we should have some humility here that we are just humans and we're part of a fabric of some gigantic space-time continuum. It might be that there are other factors more important than human-based factors which have a lot to do with driving what's actually happening in the universe. And so let's have a serious discussion about this, not, you
Climate denier.
No, I'm not climate denier.
You're not allowed to talk?
Yeah, exactly. All right.
The second
where do you want me to give you all my shit? I'll get that done before we finish.
Well, I don't think we should have billionaires in the world because there's carbon dioxide.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you want trees, we kind of need carbon dioxide.
Right.
The problem with this is, it's very much like the vaccine debate. They don't want to get to the scientific heart of the matter.
You're a vax denier.
Exactly. Anytime anybody questions this, they get shut down as not understanding or being an idiot or whatever. But what we need to dig into is that there's no doubt that industrialization and burning chemicals and creating nuclear power plants that are not properly serviced and break when we have tsunamis and spend 7 years leaking cesium-238 into the ocean. That's the biggest environmental problem that we're facing right now.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so ironic when you think back to the Clinton era people. They got their ride forward was to use the phrase "question authority." That when the establishment,
unless it's us,
right? Exactly. Now we're in charge. So
sit down and shut up is the new policy.
Right. Exactly. It's like the beatings will stop when morale improves.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But really, what I think we should be doing is questioning inauthenticity. I mean, you can't.
That's why I dislike Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because she's inauthentic.
Right. She is not, Jenny from the hood.
No.
And I actually think the whole argument that you ought to like somebody more or less because they started out poor is a bullshit argument. I think you should start and say, let's look, however you want to measure accomplishments, however you choose to do it. If there's I'm going to fail the scruffy test because you're never going to get one of those stupid wool caps on my head with, the scruffy beard and the strange pants and those shoes with the white soles.
A meme coming.
It's not happening. It's not happening. That's inauthentic because you're not going to see that happening. Although perhaps we could do a gag.
Lumberjack, Charles.
We should go around New York dressed like that, asking people, homeless people on the street, just informing them that they really ought to get on the train and run for president because there's money in that, living in big houses or whatever.
Absolutely.
But that questioning inauthenticity is something that you really should do. That is what journalists used to do, calling out fakery. Instead, it's the fake news, as Donald Trump actually eloquently has noted. So with that, we do have, and I know we took a lot longer than normal to go over just a few slides, we're going to have some new evidence for you. And this is a phrase that I hope will come into the lexicon, as it were, corrupt persuasion. So when Donald Trump and Sean Hannity get on this whole issue of Andrew Weitzman, who's the top deputy for Mueller, and how he screwed up the prosecution of Anderson, they make the case that Arthur Anderson was unjustly accused of 18 U.S.C. Section 1512, obstruction of justice.
But they destroyed all those documents.
Right. They did destroy the documents, but apparently, so what happened was they were convicted at trial court level, and the problem with that is when you get convicted at trial court level, you have to then note that you've been convicted of a felony as a firm. And if you're convicted of a felony as the firm, an accounting firm, under the rules, you cannot issue audits for any publicly traded companies, which kind of puts you out of the accounting profession.
Right.
And so you could try to appeal that, which they did, but by then, you're out of business, and you win a period.
You could stay in business, you just can't do accounting
that
anymore.
kind of stuff, right?
Maybe this could become a taco truck.
Yeah, exactly.
We need all these people for that.
But so this precedent is this precedent of did you knowingly engage in corrupt persuasion is an interesting precedent that will lie at the heart or stand at the heart of the legal advice that BKD and Pricewaterhouse and Cohn-Resnick and other accounting firms are likely getting as we speak right now, with a very important set of differences and distinctions that people need to understand. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an accountant, and I didn't stay in Equality Inn, and I probably won't. But the point here is that with charity fraud, there's no requirement to prove intent under the state laws that do apply to charity fraud, because in charity activities, you're not allowed to be engaged in activities that are more than insubstantial, that are profit seeking.
Which is like more than $1,000 or something.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do any of that. So you don't. The standard for fraud in charity, as I understand it, as lawyers explain to me, and as I read, because I can read English.
Wow.
So far, yeah, my eyes are still working. Not as well as they used to, but they work. All you have to show with charity fraud is that the statements about that are in the public domain about a charity are false and materially misleading. That can be because they omit material facts, or because they misstate material facts. Material facts are not like, the standard is not that they have to be really, really important. It's just any statement that would have changed your point of view. Had you known that statement, if it's an omitted statement, had you known that statement should have been disclosed to you, you wouldn't have taken the action of donating to the charity. That's a material fact. So had you known that the Clinton Foundation was not a charity, you probably wouldn't have made $1 million donation to that charity, because that would be something you could not deduct, and that would be something that, if you, depending on how you did it, you might be guilty of fraudulent activities yourself, exposing yourself to the prospect of doing the kind of jail time that Corinne Brown is currently doing for an $800,000 long-running charity fraud, and Steve Stockman for some. You probably would. That's a material fact. Did the charity exist or not is material. And so there's a thicket of analysis looking into this issue of whether the BKD people were corruptly persuading people to get involved in fraud. Were they knowingly obstructing justice? Were they knowingly?
That's an important question that I wanted to ask you. So just for instance, hypothetically speaking, if someone came on this program and led me to believe they had a legitimate charity, and I allowed them to participate or to conduct fundraising, and then they submitted 990s that said, well, we only got $2,700 from people in the state of New York, but they omitted the fact that they never registered with the New York State Bureau of Charities, while they convinced me it was totally fine for them to solicit $250,000. That would count as fraud, according to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, as a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, but my sense is that definitely is a fraud. And so if we think about the distinctions you have, on the one hand, you have Arthur Andersen, a much bigger firm than BKD, and you have Enron, which considered by itself is a much smaller operation than the vast network of Clinton-related charities around the world.
Didn't Enron steal like $65 billion though?
No. It was, I don't know the exact numbers, but it wasn't 65
Maybe
billion.
they transacted that.
No, well, they might have, but again, when we think through a few of the important distinctions between Arthur Andersen and BKD, in the first instance, the trustees, and they're actually, the way I read the legal documents, the way lawyers read the legal documents, there are no directors at the Clinton Foundation. The Articles of Incorporation state that the people who run the Clinton Foundation are to be called trustees. That's what it says. It does not say you're going to be called directors. It says in the binding Articles of Incorporation, which are more powerful than the bylaws, it says you're trustees. These trustees have a paramount obligation to look after the interests of the tax-exempt entity over their own personal and political and financial interests. They've got to put the interest of the charity first. And that means the trustees have to do it, and that means the firms like BKD and the law firms that come in and do work, take money for providing services to this charity, all of them should be putting the interest of the charity first. It's very different than Enron. Everyone understands with a for-profit entity that there's a profit motive. And you need to look behind the financial statements of a for-profit entity and try to figure out, are they pricing the services fairly? Is it a rigged situation? Do you really want to overpay to buy a company that's trading 100 times PE, which is a very high multiple? I mean, there are all sorts of reasons to be suspicious about for-profit, legitimately suspicious and concerned about for-profit activities, but not so with a charity. With a charity, you're not supposed to be engaged in those suspicious activities at all. And you're certainly not supposed to be saying it's a charity when it's not a charity, and using appeals for money on the behalf of starving Haitians and brown-skinned people around the world as an excuse to steal a whole bunch of money to fund political campaigns at expensive lifestyles, and now for this family that's growing here in New York with a third kid on the way. That's not what you're supposed to do.
It's more Clintons. It's not good. We don't want more
Yeah.
of this DNA propagating.
And then, so the other issue is this: what happened here is that in a for-profit entity, it's legitimate to say, you're only going to keep your books and records for a certain number of years. You're going to have, whatever the right number of years is. That's fine if you're for-profit, because people understand that for-profit entities can change. You can start out and say that, you can get a charter, a corporate charter to do for-profit activity that says you can do whatever you want to do within reason. Not so for a charity. A charity has to limit its purposes to specific, if a federally tax-exempt charity has to limit its purposes. And so therefore, you've got to, if you set this thing up, hypothetically speaking, October 23rd, 1997, you have to retain all documents for all time that show that you validly organized that charity on October 23, 1997. Specifically, did 3 directors come together on that date and fill out all related paperwork, including applications for, let's say, a post office box? Did they do that right? Because they didn't. And did they subsequently register in the various states?
Screwy business with post office boxes, Charles.
Yeah, exactly. Those are tough. I mean, the former president of the United States, I can't be expected to figure that stuff out.
You gotta fill it out. And
Yeah, forms. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you got to pass this organization test, and you got to retain for all time records that show that you were validly organized. That is to say, the main Clinton Foundation. Then after that, that you were validly operating in conformity with all applicable laws.
Fred Sobel tells us the Hubble seed is unstoppable.
Yeah. And so, the fourth point of distinction that's pretty important is that in a standard, in this Anderson case, the government had to prove had to prove beyond whatever the standard was. I don't think it was by a preponderance of evidence, possibly in that case, or there may be beyond a reasonable doubt. Whatever the standard was, it was the government's job to prove the case. The table flips in a tax case involving a charity. Normally, when the IRS decides to come after you, like they go after Manafort, they say, all right, Goodman, prove to us, you have to prove to us that you were organized lawfully and operated lawfully since October 23, 1997. And you say, well, I'd like to do that, but I kind of bleach bit everything and destroyed the devices. I got no records. I got nothing. Well, you're out of luck. You're in one hell of a shithole. And you're not going to get out of it.
Yeah.
There's no amount of bleach that's going to clean that thing out. So then the final one, and this is really, we're going to go through this now in some considerable depth. People talk about getting an independent public accounting firm or independent firm of public accountants to do work. So the question arises, just how independent was BKD LLP? Was it truly independent? Or was it, a co-conspirator in a scheme to protect itself? Once it found out just how stuck in at so many levels they were, did they cease being truly independent and able, therefore, to render advice to clients, both for accounting matters and tax matters, or did they become the driving force, as perhaps the Clintons might allege, if this does go down into a court case? There
Throw
could be a
them under
nice,
the bus.
exactly, a nice wedge.
Oh, we didn't know this was all the Tiger's fault.
Right, exactly, and this is not the kind of thing that Mueller likes to do or prosecutors like to do. They don't like to do that at all, right? I mean, you just go to BKD and say, over here, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Hansen, on the one hand, we have this nasty prison over here where your stuffed animals are not going to last. Well, that's not the only thing that's not going to last. Or on the other hand, we have this work-release kind of deal where you can work on your tennis game. If you want golf, golf is fine. If you want to just walk around the garden, you can do that. And you can swap tails with mafia dons. Those are your choices. And, before...
Apparently, if you can type in prison, you're okay.
Yeah, these guys probably could type.
Yeah.
So the point being that there's a nice little wedge that I think will be developed where the opportunity for BKD to mitigate its trouble will be to blame everything on dopey Andrew Kessel and the Clintons and the trustees, maybe even go against certain employees and others. Our Magaziner would be a prime target as a guest. So we just didn't know. I mean, we couldn't possibly. How did you expect us to know? That defense will not work well for an accounting firm. But so this I think the question of corrupt persuasion in the Rehnquist, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but the Rehnquist opinion focuses on, it hangs its hat in part on the ability for somebody to understand that what they were doing was illegal. And so I suppose the Clinton defense is going to be, I don't know.
I didn't know anything about that.
I don't know.
I don't understand.
What's law anyway?
I was a little too coked up.
So the reason I think one of the reasons why I decided to focus on this is that the Enron case has attracted a lot of ink and a lot of actually cinematic and television attention. Could it be, though, that what is more dangerous than for-profit fraud is charity fraud? And when we get into this, that running a charity irresponsibly internationally may end up bringing down a number of the most powerful dynastic political families on earth. Just as people are advocating for unregulated globalism, this could be this story as we tell it and as people grow to appreciate it. And if the IRS does its job and actually goes after these people and brings them to justice, as people think about the saga over time, it could well be that this charity fraud, exposing it, investigating it, convicting and incarcerating people for committing it, could do a lot to drain the swamp and to affect the course of history. So if we go to the next page, I want to we'll fly through this, and we provide a link you can get to, if you go to the Zero Hedge link, and don't bring it up, please, Jason, but if people go to it and then follow the link to the WikiLeaks thing, you'll see the whole memo, read it for yourselves. But remember, this memo is dated the 10th of November, 2008, so just after the election, right? This is before the Memorandum of Understanding. And I excised here, some key quotes from this memo. And the Kamiki Gibson started out at, I think, Williams and Connolly. She has, a strong resume, and
Great name.
She does have a great name, and she's basically, to summarize this highly technical analysis, she's basically saying you got a gigantic flotilla of turds in your foundation punch bowl here, and this is like a mess.
Flotilla.
It's really a stinkilla.
Hovercraft.
It's a stink-nado.
Wow.
And in so many words, she said, you got this problem and that problem, another problem, legal problems, all sorts of problems. And this is the draft that's in the public existence. We don't know the exhibits. We don't know what else was there. She specifically says she's reviewed the foundation as opposed to its initiatives, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS being one of them, which I have not reviewed. How could you not review the biggest piece of the foundation and write anything? Right? She's going out on a limb here, probably saying, I don't know what my name is.
Well, maybe you read the first 3 sentences and it's already a disaster. You don't need to continue.
So here's Obama. He's been president now, for president-elect. He's getting ready to be interviewed by the FBI, and this Kamiki Gibson issues this draft memo. And what people like to do in the legal world, to be careful, is they like to say, you know what, the only thing that matters for me is the final version of my memo. Okay?
And the retainer.
That matters a lot, that I want up front. But the final version of the memo, so no draft means anything. I will disclaim it's a draft. I'm still thinking. You want to see a draft, I'll show it to you, but it's not the final work product. The only thing that matters is something that says final work product or complete work product of this firm. Okay, so as a guess, there might have been previous versions of this memo before the 10th of November 2008. But here, nonetheless, you have the elections over. This is 6 days before Valerie Jarrett puts her signature on a memorandum of understanding that basically says the Clinton Foundation's fantastic. It's wonderful. It couldn't be better. So if you're sitting there, and we know, unfortunately for Mueller, and unfortunately for people, crooked people who may be in the FBI, we know what the FBI does when they want to land on somebody and try to win. They manafort them, right? So you go back into this timeline here, and you say, okay, on the 10th of November 2008, please explain the status of the Clinton Foundation on that date, and every day and every moment thereafter. Please show me all the emails that can be accessed. The NSA has them, other people have them. Show me all the emails that are flying around at this time. Here's Kamiki Gibson making the mistake of sending by email this memo, all right?
But is she part of it? I mean, she seems to be honest, right?
We don't know. We don't know. I mean, she could have been brought in, you know, we don't know if she's honest.
But she's the one saying, hey, this is a big problem, right? So that's...
Well, but she's also, like, you know, one of the things I've learned, not the hard way, but I've just learned through life, is that if you want me to try to help you solve a problem that you think you have, you can't say, well, I think I have a problem.
But there's no problem.
I think I have a problem with an entity that's called the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, where the Commonwealth of Massachusetts said, thou shalt not operate. And here we are, November 10th, 2008. You cannot operate from the 31st of December 2007 forward. We've been operating nonetheless. We've collected $140 million from Unitate, and we are not going to tell people that we have that much because we couldn't, because we stole some of that money. You know, and I want you to study all this, Charles, but you can't examine the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. I don't take the assignment. I mean, that's obvious window dressing. You're just trying to get my name associated with something. Right? So to accept this assignment calls in question, to me,
her judgment.
Her judgment. But having said that, you know, she's not as bad as Doug Band. I mean, that's really poor judgment, saying, you know, I want to write a memo implicating everybody in the Clinton Foundation in massive fraud, including myself. What the hell? You know, I want to go down with this ship too.
Where is that guy, Doug Band? Can we interview him?
Oh, no. I mean, he's living large, man. He bought David Rockefeller's house.
So he's got to be in New York, right?
Oh, he's here, but no way we'd be able to. I mean, Loomer might be able to interview him for a job. Yeah. That's what you should do. But anyway, so this basically says, this thing in red, it says, you know, this organization, remember the whole organizational test, you've got to be something separate and apart from Bill Clinton and the political machine around Bill Clinton. This is basically saying, we can't tell the difference between the foundation, if it is something, if it's a thing, it may not even be a thing, and whatever Bill Clinton does. We just don't know. You know, it's like,
it's just his posse of friends rolling around.
You know, living large.
On trips.
Look, fired up the jet plane, Epstein.
Does he hunt? Are they going on like skink hunts? And
you know, not doing any skeet shooting, I don't think. They may do some golfing and drinking, whatever. So this is just some excerpts. If we go to the next page, a few more excerpts, same basic thing. It says, you know, this is November 10th, 2008, right? It must act immediately to bring the foundation into compliance with the law and standards that govern not-for-profits. So this is basically saying flatly, on the 10th of November 2008, a competent lawyer has been studying this shit since September. On her resume, it says since May, but in this memo, it says since September. And studying this thing, and you know, I've concluded as a lawyer that you're operating outside the law. The 6 days later, I mean, you know, I suppose God created the world in 7 days, and 6 days later, you know, Bruce Lindsay is signing with Valerie Jarrett something that says the Clinton Foundation walks on water. I mean, you know,
after this memo
this memo's there,
you got a bit of a problem.
Yeah, you're not in compliance with the law.
And how did we get this memo from WikiLeaks?
This is WikiLeaks, but they have not. They actually, John Solomon, on the Larry Doyle matter, got to the Clinton Foundation and they admitted that this is a legitimate memo.
Wow.
Unfortunately for them, they should have said, what are you talking about? Kamiki Gibson? Never heard of her.
They're not remotely the smartest lawyers in the world. They seem to be quite stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, but, you know, they like parties, I guess. Anyway, so this is, you know, as they say, somebody wrote to me from outside the country by email and said, I'm a cricket aficionado because I said the word sticky wicket. No, I just like the sound of sticky wicket. This is a serious sticky wicket on November 10th. But now, how serious might it be for BKD, you ask? Though you didn't. So let's go to the next page.
I'm curious what will happen to our
All right, so I am the kind of person who, since I have no life, I like to check numbers. And so I went and I said, let's check and see what the financial statements say, the important cash flow statements, which BKD said, you know what, we're not going to issue any of those, so you're required to under SFAS 117, which applied in 2001 through 2004 when they first did this stuff. We're not going to do a cash flow statement because if we did that, that's going to allow you to check where we stole all the money, where the Clintons stole all the money, so we're not going to do that. So what we have laid out here are the BKD summary lines, key lines from the BKD issued cash flow statements for 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, in the case of 2004, what we're talking about here, these are statements for 2004 that were issued on the 9th of June 2006 for 2005 and 2004. What you're required to do under the accounting standards is do, if it's been in existence for 2 years, you have to put 2 years of information out so that people can begin to judge a trend and see what's going on. These 2 years have to be prepared on a consistent basis following all applicable AICPA, American Institute for Certified Public Accountants standards. And the numbers that are in red are numbers where that wasn't done. So if you start at 2004, the reason 2004 is wrong is that basically they diverted $60+ million worth of cash, meaning $60+ million worth of cash was stolen in 2004 out of the books and records, of the official books and records of the Clinton Foundation.
Kevin is reminding us that BKD issued an audit opinion for 2007 on December 12th, 2008, 32 days after the Kamiki-Gibson report.
Hey, Kevin, you're stepping on my trunk here, man. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
Sorry,
I'm building the case. I'm building the case. So he's absolutely right. But we start out in 2004, and the starting point for these numbers that were basically created by the fiction department of BKD on 9 June 2006 are just invented out of whole cloth. Okay? There was no, for example, in 2004, the biggest thing, you're asked to do one thing, to put up a complex in Little Rock. And you spent a lot of time and energy working on it from 2002, 3, and 4 in particular. And before you roll in your front door and say, look, that double wide thing that's on by the river there, we told everybody it was going to cost all in $100 million. We're now telling you it's $160 million. It's not like you get to
pesky John Glasgow.
Yeah, even with him still being dead, it's not like you can do that without a gigantic building project having a report that comes in, an independent person not connected to BKD, not connected to the Clintons, not connected to the contractor, not beholden to the city of Little Rock, comes in and says, I'm a nationally ranked real estate valuation firm. We've done 10,000 assignments in 20 years, and we're intimately familiar with these type of complexes, having valued this one and that one and that one.
Valuing strip clubs and IMAX theaters all around the world.
Exactly, and Bordellos, and don't ask about that. But anyway, you have a reputable firm, of which there are many, that will look at this and say, you know what, spending this kind of money for something the way you did it, while you also were chasing around the world fighting HIV/AIDS and climate change when you can't do that and you're not a foundation, we can't do this. We can't render you this thing because you're not, in order, the books and records and laws that apply to Presidential Archives state that in order for you to make a donation to the National Archives, you have to, in this case, be a validly organized and operated foundation on November 18th, 2004, which you weren't. So we can't even write the opinion. We can't do the work. I mean, that's what you get. So is there even a report referenced here? No, there's no report. Nobody knows.
There's an IMAX theater.
There is. Anyway, so we know that the numbers, the starting place in 2004 is wrong. We know that the numbers, in the numbers that were put out 9 June 2006 for 2005 and in 2007 for 2005 are exactly the same, right? You have the same cash flow from operations, 71 million, invested 19.9, although the numbers is cooked. Financed 21.9, that number is cooked. The change is therefore wrong, and the starting and ending balance is wrong. So all these numbers are wrong. And I can say that with authority, just as somebody who's not an accountant, not a lawyer, because you look at the math and they're wrong. They're wildly off.
See, I think they're relying on most people looking at this and saying, I have no idea what that is.
Right.
They filled it out, just file it.
Right, yeah, no, that's not the way people look at this stuff. And then, so 2006, both sets of numbers, the one that came out in 7 for 6, the one that came out in 8 for 6, agree in the cash flow statement. But in 2007, Kevin was pointing out, you have an audit that appears on the 12th of December 2008, and it says they generated $55.6 million of cash from operations, and a net ended up with $85 million. But on December 31st, 2009, when they issue an audit for 8 and for 7, they say, no, actually, we only generated $12.7 million in 2007, not 55.6.
That's a big difference.
That is a large difference, 42.9 million. But in a time frame, this is before Hillary testifies, to become Secretary of State, and before they reorganize CHI, before they get federal tax exemption, they make a decision to radically alter the previously reported results for the Clinton Foundation to say that where before we said we had 55.6 million of free cash flow, of operating cash flow, it's only 42.9 because 42.9 was trapped. It was supposed to be used for a specific purpose. We're going to show you what that means in a second. And that's a really material difference. You can't slide that baby in to an audit, especially when you're an accounting firm that's been associated with this Clinton Foundation going all the way back to 2001. You can't just slide this gigantic change in and say, well, don't look at that. It doesn't matter. It's only 42.9 million. It's roughly half the real cost of the Clinton Foundation complex, which I think was around 85 million. That's a big freaking change. Yeah, and it calls into question why you would say that when you say it's free cash flow, that means it's unrestricted. You can do whatever you want with it. This is saying, no, there are material restrictions on that donation. It was to be used for a specific purpose. So it calls into question, for what purpose are you talking about, right? So it was restricted, and people knew about this, and there's paperwork in the BKD files, emails back and forth, in this period, 12 December 2008 to 31 December 2009. Why did we make this change?
They're asking why.
Well, there definitely would be, in the files and records, the work papers for this, which, the IRS can get, and which BKD can't claim. Again, there's an accounting privilege or anything. They got to produce this stuff.
Is anything happening with getting this?
Could well be. I don't know. But, I'm hoping with all this rattling of cages. And what this would do, the impact of this would be to call into question the tax status of this foundation, right? If you took this money and you said you could use it for any purpose, but you made a decision later to say, hang on, that's not the case. I got to restrict it for a specific purpose. You look in the language, and Kevin does not know about this yet unless he read the report, that in the December 2008 version, on the question of uncertain tax positions, they insert this language and say, we're going to not take a position on this until December 31st, 2009. They knew they had a problem December 12th, 2008. And they knew they couldn't solve it before Obama became president and before Hillary became Secretary of State. So they just said, look, we've got to be silent on this question of whether there's uncertain tax status of the Clinton Foundation. We'll just put this language in. Nobody will read it. Nobody will care about staff position number FIN 48. No one will care about this.
Huh.
But these are breadcrumbs on the hiking trail for people who want to set the bloodhounds loose. The largest piece by far of the Clinton Foundation, as it turns out in 2007, 8, and 9, was this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which legally didn't exist. It couldn't exist. Massachusetts said, thou shalt not exist in our state where you're existing and operating. And so you think, I've done this in other contested situations, just think of the number of people who knew about this fraud at the time. Think of the number of files and emails and places where concerns have been registered. And somebody said, don't worry about that. Obama's president, he's the magic president, he's going to make all your problems go away. We got to get these nasty Republicans, we got to keep them down. We got to go after, with a Lois Lerner, we got to target conservatives in this time frame.
Have we heard anything from the person who's replaced Lois Lerner as the new head of the IRS? No.
But let's go to the next page, to the videotape. Because it gets worse.
Yes.
Okay, so what I did here, this is just the asset side of the so-called statement of assets of the Clinton Foundation for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And rather than make every number red, which I could have done, I just said, the years in which the years are in red are years where there are serious problems. So we see that's every year, right? Every year of the period where BKD finally decided to pretend that they might be auditing the Clinton Foundation, maybe in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, having eschewed, I love that word, eschewed, the practice of saying, we allowed the Clinton Foundation trustees, they see things through different prism. They said, we're going to use accounting principles that are not allowed in the United States of America because the Clintons are higher than American law. We said, okay, you're a globalist, you do what you want. That's fine with us. We're BKD, we'll play along. We're from Arkansas and Missouri. We don't really follow these fine points. We'll put our name to this. Sure, yeah, this is a valid audit. I mean, it's ridiculous. So
I had a high school English teacher who had a bumper sticker said "eschew obfuscation."
Yeah, I like that
He
one.
thought it was hilarious.
He probably went to Horseman. But anyway, so just taking some of the important points here. Cash for the Bush-Clinton-Katrina fund. So they go out in 2005. I've written articles about this, done interviews, and they raise money for this Katrina fund. They don't wait to have an actual organization. They just start raising money. They have to do any of the paperwork properly. They commit all kinds of solicitation frauds. We don't really know how much money was raised for the Bush-Clinton-Katrina fund. There are all kinds of problems with that. This is a gigantic red flag. Just that they consolidate something they don't control, this Bush-Clinton-Katrina fund. And in the tax filing in 2005 for the Clinton Foundation, they leave out something they do control, which is the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. You can't do that. You know, and these audits assume that it's part of the Clinton Foundation. So I mean, it's just a rookie mistake. Anybody with, you know, who's taken, let's say, 25% of the entry-level accounting class would understand that this is just rubbish. You can't do that. And then they insert this idea, assets limited as to use. That sounds like pretty fancy to me. That's like sanitation.
Is that made-up language?
It sounds like, you know, sanitation engineer instead of garbage man. I mean, what you're saying here is, you know, I have assets that donors have said have got to be used for a specific purpose. And the normal person would say, okay, what did the donors say you got to use that for? Fighting HIV/AIDS in Africa and around the world. And then you say, well, I'm supposed to be in Little Rock. I'm supposed to be based in the presidential center here, you know, not operating an IMAX theater and a strip club. I'm supposed to be housing the presidential records created during Bill Clinton's 8, you know, years in the White House, a period of time some would like to forget. And
the club's much more fun.
Right. And this very idea that an accountant would say, oh yeah, I'm going to put a category in. We were thinking of calling it, you know, fraudulent receipt of cash we're not supposed to have to fight purposes we're not allowed to pursue.
It's a little bit long. Can we shorten it?
Yeah, assets limited as to use. Then contributions receivable. You look at this. Now, you've operated businesses. When the revenues of your business go up, typically your receivables go up. That's what can kill. Growth can kill a company, because if you haven't figured out a way, you know, somebody will say they're going to buy your shit, but they're only going to pay you 3 years from now.
Well, that's a big problem
Right.
in Hollywood. I would do all these jobs, and then actually getting the money was a
Right.
separate job.
So generally what you do see is you see revenues go up and contribution receivables also go up. So when you see a case like the revenues exploding from 2004 up to 2009, or from 2006, let's say, to 2009, revenues doing this, but contributions receivable doing this, a wise Latina accountant or just a wise accountant will look at that and say, that didn't happen.
Put on the shrunken BU T-shirt and start dancing around.
That didn't happen. And what did happen, as we demonstrated in the last presentation, is likely that the people around the Clinton Foundation and Unitate say, you know what we're going to do here? There's a lot of money nobody seems to care about. It comes out of airline tickets. It comes out of this stuff. No one's checking this. So, you know, we're going to send you a whole bunch of money, and we're not going to quibble too much about whether you recognize it as incoming receivables in your books. And the quid pro quo is we want a nice vig on it. We want, you know, if we send you 500 million, you're going to send us back, call it 150, 200 million, and then maybe you'll send it to Cayman or you'll send it here and there, and then we won't complain in Switzerland, and you've got Massachusetts covered and Arkansas covered and the IRS covered and all that. That'd be a perfect way to, you know, forget these starving African AIDS-ridden kids. We don't give a shit about that. We got mistresses. You know, we got boyfriends. We got, we got all sorts of stuff we got to pay for. So this is, again, a gigantic red flag that you would have these numbers out here that show receivables falling as revenues are exploding. Doesn't make any sense. When you also see an investment line, you know, $500,000 or so, $500,000, $1.5 million, 6.5, now down to 1.5, down. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Are you explaining that they're also incompetent at cooking the books?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, pretty much. The other thing
That is great.
that if you look at this as well, you see properties. We've demonstrated before. I think we've done a presentation to show that the real value of the property in 2004, this end of 2004, was probably, the donation was worth a lot more than they said, a lot more than 36. if it was lawful, which, I mean, again, there are entries in the liability side that would create all kinds of problems here that are left out. But the real value of the complex after the donation was made was probably, the net value was probably more like 20.
Of just the land that the library is on?
Well, so they didn't spend, they said they spent 165 million. They said they donated 36 million in cash, which they didn't do. They didn't spend 165 million. They probably spent more like 85.
How is this worth 20 million? Isn't it just a strip of grass next to a swamp in Arkansas?
No, they built up a complex. And it's not, what I'm saying is the net value, at the end of 2004, that's when they built the complex and they've turned an interest. They've given a license to the National Archives to use a portion, 75% by square footage of the complex. I think we did a show where we said if you used a more reasonable estimate for the cost of like 85 million, which is more in line with what they told the city of Little Rock they were going to spend, and it's not like construction firms say, we're going to come in and just give you a number out of the blue, 86 million, then we're going to say, it's really 165, and nobody says, I'm not happy about that.
Got to sharpen that pencil.
Yeah, a little bit more, So I don't believe the 165 number. I therefore don't believe the 126 number. I think when you sharpen, when pencils are sharp, when forensic accountants, and give Trump a hard time if you want to, but the one thing he doesn't do is overpay for properties. And so his people would be able to look at this right away and say, look, I noticed something really odd that, this double wide here that you got for the Little Rock thing, there's the Project Heifer International headquarters is right nearby in the same site. It looks a hell of a lot like it, and it costs about $25 million. So why did this thing cost $165 million? I mean, it'd be one thing if there's a real firm. If you got Sam Zell, for example, who may or may not have such a firm, but has a lot of real estate experience. You get a real estate tycoon to walk in and give you a valuation for a purpose-built facility. Mind you, this has to be, its only use can be to store presidential records, and it can only be donated by a validly organized and operating foundation.
Is this Heifer International right next to it?
Yeah.
It looks smaller.
Yeah, but 165 versus 20.
Right.
It's not that much smaller.
Yeah, it's probably maybe half or 1/3, or actually bigger than that.
So forget all of these red numbers for a second. Just focus on this assets limited as to use, okay? And that number is 17% of the balance sheet at year-end 2007, 35% at the end of 2008, and 26% at the end of 2009 in the statements that are prepared for 8 and for 9. Okay? Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. They're prepared in 9 for 8 and 7, and 10 for 9 and 8. And we look at the definition of it here. It says, assets limited as to use include assets of the Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative. Okay? This is a document issued on 31 December 2009 in its, quote, partnership with Unitate. Okay? There's no, if you have a foundation that has a partnership with somebody, a meaningful partnership, there's special disclosures that need to get made. So there are no such disclosures for the Clinton Foundation. Then in addition to which, they claim in the application for federal tax exemption, December 31st, 2009, for Clinton Health Access Initiative, that it's not a successor to any other organization. This is the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation in 7, 8, and 9. Of course it's a successor. They're in a partnership with Unitate. How did you transfer a partnership with Unitate to Clinton Health Access Initiative? And don't tell me there aren't all sorts of emails and books of records and legal agreements between, Unitate in Switzerland and the Clinton Foundation in Arkansas, and all kinds of audit trail, people raising questions, and then people asking, we've been doing these programs as the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative all over God's green earth. We went through the 37 countries where they've been operating. There are records in every one of those countries where people are probably asking, and many of them, what the hell is this thing? Tell us why we should let you do this in Burkina Faso and Nigeria and Botswana and Namibia and all these places. There have got to be extensive emails and records flying all over the place. And then you say, well, are we starting to understand why the Secretary of State might not want the government to have control over its transmissions all around the world? Could it be because there's a real motive here that the various people associated with the Clinton Foundation, especially Bill himself, and magazine are saying, Hillary, if you operate the State Department, they're going to find out about our fraud. We can't do it that way. You've got to basically do it all through the toilet bowl.
I believe that's where we have a meme of Hillary saying, "Hold my beer."
Exactly.
But Charles, we should have possibly called today's episode "Indecent Disclosure."
Right, that's a good one. Yeah. And then if we go to the next page, so that with this, all the above and our previous 136 broadcasts, as they do in these indictments, they say we repeat and assert all the above, and then ask you to consider, to wonder whether BKD is going to be able to defend the indefensible. Okay, so that's actually Warren Buffett. One of the things I like about his sense of humor, he calls his corporate jet the indefensible.
Why?
Because it's indefensible to have a corporation pay for a private jet to fly around the world. But
he owns the money.
But he owns a lot of the company, so it's his money basically. So these are just 13 things out of many that we could say that anyone seeking to defend BKD, Michael Wolff, Eric Hansen, and the other accounting firms that are going to be involved with this are going to have to try to defend. And I'm just note to the people thinking about it, you're not going to win. So you may run a lot of bills up. You're not going to be able to defend this. You're going to have to start by explaining why BKD issued accounting work product claiming...
Caddy?
What?
Did you say caddy?
Accounting work product.
Accounting work.
Okay, well, I did mumble. But accounting work product that flatly states that these statements are issued and are not in compliance with American law.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
That kind of like, that's tough. I mean, that's
Why did they bother doing it?
It's exactly, well, they once they did that, they knew they had to hide it, so it's not on the Clinton Foundation website, the primary portal where you're supposed to find all the stuff out. So you start there. And remember, the principle of accounting is that, something that began October 23rd, 1997, that had to file a tax return through December 31st, 1997, that didn't do that, is effed.
You forgot to do the counting.
Yeah, you didn't do no counting. You're just effed up. I mean, there's no way out of that. You got to go and file that document, and then you got to refile all your other documents. So these accounting statements they compound. Their frauds compound. Now, the next problem that BKD has is that the Clinton Foundation took their work, right? And they can say, well, they can hide behind a management representation letter. They took the work that BKD issued under their name, and the Clinton Foundation then sent these audits around the United States of America. We know they went to Massachusetts, we know they went to California, then we know they went to New York, we know they went to Michigan.
Mail fraud is very popular these days, Charles.
And each one of those things, it's mail fraud. Every time they did that. And they circulate now, because governments put them up on their website, they circulate in the public domain. So because BKD, remember, they have to serve the public interest. The public interest is not, encouraging presidents to use charities named after themselves to pay off their legal bills and finance Chelsea's lifestyle and their own lifestyle. That's not what charities are supposed to do. And, the public interest is not being served, so BKD should be condemned each moment that they fail to rescind, make public, as they have done with Celadon Corporation. They need to come forward and Spike Lee it, do the right thing, and say, we made...
BKD has done something with Celadon Corporation?
Yeah, BKD they were the ones who rescinded Celadon's financial statements.
Oh.
Celadon Trucking, I think.
So maybe they'll do that again.
Well, we've talked about that before. That's the correct thing for them to try to limit their liability. They need to do this yesterday.
But didn't we tell Eric Hansen something or send him something a long time ago that we just never, when we did like 2 or 3 Eric Hansen episodes in a row,
he's decided,
never did anything.
He said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to fly around the world. I got Davos to go to, man. I got
seats at the game, Mizzou. I know the Tiger.
By 2004, when, Bruce Lindsay, who some claim is a smart lawyer, and I think, the word does begin with L and end with R, but it's not lawyer. BKD absolutely was aware that the Clinton Foundation was diverting assets away from its only authorized purpose, which is to be a Little Rock-based operation, when they became involved assisting Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative file a fraudulent tax return, which they did in 2005 for 2004. So sometime during 2004, they likely became aware that the Clinton Foundation was diverting assets solicited, in violation of state and federal international law to an unauthorized substantial purpose of, quote, fighting HIV/AIDS internationally using drugs that were not checked by the FDA as would have been required, in an organization that was not lawfully organized, that was never got federal tax exemption. They had to be aware of that. And then, this is we won't get into this in great depth today because we're already over time, but the lease that the city of Little Rock entered into on March 1st, 2002 was a long-term lease, 99 years with one 99-year extension. Had many, many requirements, including that the Clinton Foundation had to spend $100 million in total on the Little Rock complex, which I don't believe they did. And BKD was the auditor for the city of Little Rock, who was leasing this stuff, in theory, to the Clinton Foundation.
But that's got to be why they hired them. They want to control both ends.
Well, that is not independent. I mean, in the accounting profession, when you start, and in the banking profession, legal profession, when you're on both sides of the trade, you are certainly not independent, which you can do, but there are lots of caveats, and there are hoops that you have to jump through here to say that even though I was representing both parties, I took extra steps to make sure that my accounting was proper, and I don't think they come close to passing that. For one thing, the Clinton Foundation on March 1st, 2002, I don't think it was lawfully organized that day. They were using, several days later, as the first BKD opinion issued for 1 and 0 that states, we don't believe in issuing accounting statements that comply with law. Well, that being the case, how do you enter into a lease with the city of Little Rock? So there are all kinds of problems with that. They then issue these combined financial statements. Remember I explained that if you're operating an entity like the Clinton Foundation all over the United States and around the world, there are multiple obligations to either register the Little Rock, Arkansas Corporation as a foreign corporation, or in a foreign jurisdiction, you actually have to create foreign subsidiaries, and then you have to combine everything. You can't just say, I'm going to show you Enron style, part of my operations one year and then a different part the next year and create a misleading impression of what's going on. You can't do that.
Yes, they love to do, though.
That's all they do. That's what they do. Well, that's what this team loves to do. And then, you have this issue of the University of Arkansas and the Clinton School of Public Service, which I would say is probably definition 2, 3, and 4, and not definition 1 of service and servicing your client. But that's not properly accounted for. We talked about they didn't get the independent valuation for the complex. They didn't document Clinton Foundation relationships with the various Project Heifer International, domestic and international operations. They didn't account for all the subsidiaries and affiliates of the Clinton Foundation around the world over many years. If we can go back to that. Sorry.
Why that happened.
That's okay. We've done shows about the laureate, I should say laureate, I made a mistake there, that should be not laureates, but laureate with an E. Joint venture, laureate was absolutely not, the Clinton Foundation was absolutely not allowed to start working for a for-profit educational institution and then allow Bill Clinton, beginning in April of 2010, to sign a multi-year agreement where he made in total $17.6 million. You can't do that.
It's good work if you can get it, Charles.
And then thereafter, from beginning with the new CHI application on 31 December 2009, BKD was, I would argue, a co-conspirator in submitting numerous false applications for federal tax exemption, knowingly false applications that said various bits and pieces of the Clinton Foundation were not successors. And then Michael Wolff himself, the chief risk officer, and talk about a poor title for this dude.
Risk-taking officer.
Yeah, chief risk embracing officer, signs on November 16th, 2015, amended tax returns for the Clinton Foundation, starting with 2010, resting on this fraudulent accounting base of December 31st, 2009. That's all BKD work product. He knowingly signs this document in the middle of a political campaign that, had they exposed the fraud then, November 16th, 2015, Hillary Clinton certainly would not have been the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. And Bernie Sanders could well have been the president of the United States right now had he done the right thing November 16th, 2015. I'm not saying I like Bernie, but it was not a small thing
That he said nobody cares about your emails?
Well, not Bernie, that Wolf actually lent BKD's professional name and put his own name as chief risk officer down on multiple IRS forms that allowed the Clintons to say, look, we've had somebody check this. And BKD is swearing by their work, and on the basis of BKD swearing on this work, many other accounting firms said, all right, Pricewaterhouse said, well, we can affirm, BKD's work because, they're standing by it, so we affirm our work. And Cohn Rezick says, well, BKD affirmed the work, so, Pricewaterhouse has said it's good, so we say it's good. So, I mean, this is a case that I hope, is coursing its way. If the people of Arkansas are not willing to tune up the professional board, which I believe there is in most states, certified public accountants have to operate under the supervision of local boards. If they're not willing to take a look at this and make an example of this massive fraud and hold people like Wolf and Hansen and BKD accountable, then shame on them in Arkansas, and it'll fall to some other state to do this work. Because out of the 50 states, there's going to be one that looks at this and says, we are not going to stand for this. We have to send a clear message to the world that we will not allow dynastic political families to use false front charities as vehicles for personal enrichment and political advancement. We're not going to do that. We're not going to put up with that. So you want a real crusade, AOC, you want to get behind something that will change the world, make an issue of charity fraud, okay? You do that, all right, and I may be a little bit nicer to you, possibly. But there's a real issue. That's a bipartisan issue. People on the left and the right, and the people who don't care about politics should care a lot that charities of this magnitude, that after all are supposed to take care of our property, the records of the Clinton Foundation, Clinton presidency from 1993 to 2001, that's the people's property.
Charles, this is like a 7.2 magnitude charity.
That's right, exactly. And a fantastic piece of art to close it out with. We do have a few quick
yes, we do indeed. Well, some of it was kind of like follow-up information on the article from True Pundit, where we had like images of some of the
the reporters, yeah, who've been. But there are a lot of very famous reporters who are implicated as possibly having taken cash from Fusion GPS.
That's crazy.
And it's a long list. I want to say it's 65, 70 people. And at the very least, and here they are. There's 38, I guess. It's a long list.
So now this is from Glenn Greenwald, right? It's an event memo, Berenson's Cocktails.
Yeah.
Love cocktails. These 38 reporters should never be trusted. Who do we have here? Diane Sawyer, George Stephanopoulos.
David Muir is big. John Carl is big. John Heilman is still big. Mark Halpern is no longer. Nora O'Donnell. These are CBL. Look at the CNN group. Long list, including, is Jeff Zucker on that list?
Daily Beast.
What a horrible name for anything, right?
It's so
MSNBC.
stupid. Rachel Maddow. To be determined? Yeah. I've determined she's not to be trusted.
Amy Chozick. Look at these. Look at these. New York Times. Maggie
Gail
Haberman.
Collins, Glenn Thrush. I thought he was at the New York Times.
Yeah. And Mike Allen, who's now at Axios.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt, like George Stephanopoulos we saw just the other day, basically almost like running lines with Michael Cohen.
Yeah, he should be ashamed of himself. Again, he's a rogue scholar, George Stephanopoulos.
Well, as is, what's her name, Rachel Maddow.
As is Susan Rice.
The whole thing is a flim-flam operation there, Charles.
Exactly. I'm thinking also of the Caracas live feed. I don't know
right.
if that's...
Yes. So that was from a tweet, right?
I don't know if it's still operative. I think it was Citizen Journalist or something.
No, it was Sputnik, I think, actually.
Was it the live feed?
No, maybe not. Postpones congressional testimony.
Well, if we don't have it, that's fine. It's okay.
I I have it. It's just sometimes what happens is the this just in stacks up.
Sorry,
it's
I was
okay.
guilty of saying I'd only send you a few, and then I ended up sending you 4 or 5. But it's all right. The viewers will know by now that that Venezuela could well be changing a lot in the short run. And the significance, if true, the significance of Venezuela changing course will not be lost if this does happen. And maybe it won't happen, in which case if Maduro hangs on, the significance of that won't be lost on us. But if a transition is accomplished, then people in Iran will be thinking very hard about just how wise it is to continue on the course they're on. Because if we succeed in standing up for the people of Venezuela in a way that ends up being a win, then I think the people in Iran may start talking in ways they haven't been talking, and the people in North Korea may say, you know what, yeah, there you go, that's it. I think if you hit that, hit that button, I don't know if it's, I mean, look at that. That's a Ceausescu Romania situation going on there. When you start seeing people, that many people in the crowd, you are not going to assume, if you're smart, that you're going to cling on to power. And even more, when you look at that and you're Maduro, and probably there's back channel from us saying to him, listen, just leave, and we'll protect you. Not in the U.S. We'll find a place that you feel.
Why would he trust the U.S.? Didn't we try to drone him? Did they find out who did that drone?
I don't know, but I mean, if it's not us, we find somebody. Maybe George Bush calls his old friend up, Pooty Poot, and says, you want to be a hero here. Why don't you reach out to Maduro? You offer to protect him, and we'll pay for it. Or whatever.
Why would George Bush do that?
Because he can look at Pooty Poot and he saw his soul when he looked at his face.
I think he's a dope. He should stay home painting his feet in the bathtub.
With his feet or his feet?
Didn't he paint like a self-portrait that's like
pretty
his
nice, actually.
feet? And he's a decent painter, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But if he had
should have stuck to that, exactly.
Right, we'd be all of us better off.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, I think we've pretty much covered it for today. That was extensive, and you became quite animated during the presentation, which
I woke up.
That's good.
I woke myself up.
So we found the Schemo.
We did indeed, and I love the whole
like
poster.
It.
And
It's, sometimes when I'm in it, this was a challenging one, but.
You mean the art department? When the art department,
right? The art department.
You can't take undue credit for the art department.
Well, Charles, I hope that people who enjoy the program will become sponsors by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. Again, $10 sponsors are going to get that amazing Sunday with Charles screensaver, and if anybody has become a sponsor at that level but has not yet received the screensaver, you can just email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org, and I'll send it out. I do want to encourage viewers, if you see a troll in the comments, make sure you make a PayPal payment and let the troll know. Become a sponsor, and when the trolls see that their trolling results in the financial sponsorship, they'll stop. It's the best anti-troll method I've thought of so far. So hopefully we can do that. So that's all for today, Charles. Thank you very much. And,
thank you.
Got a wonderful set of shows tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got another episode of The Intelligence Assessment with Kevin Shipp. And I'll see everybody for that. Thanks for watching.